The MHA's Vice President of Clinical Affairs is calling the situation a crisis and says that the public can help by considering if they can be seen outside an ER. ERs can get backed up because of a lack of inpatient beds. Those beds are unavailable as hundreds of inpatients are waiting to be discharged to rehab and skilled nursing facilities. And experts say those facilities are experiencing their own bed crunch caused by a major staffing shortage. In Boston, I'm Mark Hers, GBH News 89.7.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. On Friday, featured players joining the National Symphony of Ukraine will join us for Live Music Friday. And Tuesday next week at 11 o'clock, Michelle will be here for another edition of Ask the Mayor at the Boston Public Library. Good morning, Jim.
You know, the beauty is when we have the National Symphony of Ukraine here on Friday, we can talk about the United States abandoning Ukraine. So it should be a hell of a discussion. By the way, I assume you heard on the national news a huge decision from the appellate court in the District of Columbia, unanimously rejecting Trump's immunity claim. We will talk about it at noon with the head of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts and in the 1 o'clock hour with John King from CNN. So it's the economy stupid, or apparently we're all stupid about the economy. We talked about this with MIT's John Gruber a couple of weeks ago. The huge disconnect between how the economy is actually doing and how we all feel about it. To quote Marjorie Egan, I am not an economist.
You are not.
But consumer confidence is way up. Unemployment has been below 4% for 2 years. We added 353,000 jobs in January, much more than expected. Layoffs have been few and far between, except maybe at media companies. Inflation is down, growth is up, and yet on the economy, the latest NBC poll finds that Biden is trailing Trump by 20 points. Remember, Trump's only meaningful action on the economy was to cut taxes for the top 1 or 2%. And it's not just the economy. There's this new CNN poll that we will talk to John King about. It found that Democrats, independents, and Republicans, all three, the needle has not moved a drop since 2022 on whether Trump committed illegal acts, even though he's been indicted 91 times since the earlier poll. So the question at 877-301-8970, when did the American people of all stripes become so fact-averse? When did we become a fact-averse nation? When did our views on almost everything become so baked in that objective reality and facts appear not to matter to almost anybody? 877-301-8970. Consumer confidence is up. People are spending more. The objective reality on the economy, by almost every measure, the economy is improving. Yet in a landslide, every poll, it's not just this NBC poll, voters prefer Donald Trump on the economy over Joe Biden. How do you explain that? How do you explain the fact that there were no indictments in 2022? There are 91 indictments now, and the percentage of Democrats, independents, and Republicans who thought then and now that Trump committed, quote, illegal activity is exactly the same.
Well, I mean, one thought is that you defend the person you like and you criticize the guy you don't like. So people that like Donald Trump, even though the economy now is better than it was under him, and Biden has done a lot more. The Inflation Reduction Act, even though it wasn't an Inflation Reduction Act, ended up affecting inflation, certainly helped a lot of infrastructure around the country. But people who like Donald Trump talk about the stock market being great during Donald Trump's time, even though the stock market has gone through the roof.
So it's 100% partisanship. Nothing else matters.
I think it has a lot to do with that. I do think, on the other hand, I think that we may be catching up in general, that some people may be coming around to seeing the economy in better shape.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Well, they might be. I mean, they might.
20% difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in a poll over the weekend.
Well, I know, but I think that people may be catching up. It may be closer to the election. People feel a little bit better about things. And I also think it's your own personal economy. If you, my sister was out this week, and all she talked about was how expensive orange juice was at the Star Market or wherever she went to buy it. And I think it's the same old things. In Massachusetts, housing is really killing you. And people have, that got their abeyance and their student loans during the pandemic.
How about crime? How about the crimes of Donald Trump? Zero movement amongst Democrats.
Well, I think that's a clear example.
Zero movement amongst independents.
I think the Democrats figured he had committed the crimes, even before he was indicted, because they didn't like the guy. So he wasn't an alleged criminal. He was a criminal.
20% of Democrats didn't think he committed illegal activity in 2022. 20% of Democrats still think he didn't commit illegal activity in 2024.
You're innocent until proven guilty.
Okay, fine. 877. You know what it is? We're dopes. I mean, not only is everything baked in, everything is so partisan, as we're going to discuss with this immigration bill. Mitch, I'm not going to get into this now because it's too aggravating. Mitch McConnell is one of the least principled people in the history of the planet. It's his immigration bill, essentially, and he goes into one meeting and does a 180 on it because the other Republicans don't like it. That's leadership for you. 877-301-8097. Are you not worried? I mean, you're sort of being lighthearted. Are you not worried that facts have nothing to do with anything anymore?
I am very
You're
worried.
A little worried?
I am very worried that so many people seem to think Donald Trump would be fine leading the country again after 2024. This other story about that was talking about the economy as well, and it was saying how lots of people agree, Republicans and Democrats, about what Trump would do if he was elected again. And I find that rather interesting, that they think he would, have these mass roundups of and to deport millions of immigrants, to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which has become very popular.
Okay.
And go after his political enemies. I mean, they seem to be clear-eyed about that, and I guess they think that's okay.
But it's fine. I don't think that's really our topic. I don't think the issue is, do people see through Trump? I think the issue is when it comes to facts, not your prediction as to whether or not there'll be a pardon or whatever there is. When it comes to facts, the change in facts is irrelevant. Maybe you're right. All that's relevant is, who do I support? If he or she says X, then I stay with X. I mean, it is really, when we had Adam Kinzinger on the other day, like 100,000 people watched that interview online shortly after it when we were in New Hampshire.
He must have been good, Jim.
Remember when he said, he is really good in a moment of seriousness. He's terrific.
I was saying we were good.
I know, I was joking. I was not responding to your joke. He was I don't think they're watching because of us. They're watching because of him. He acknowledged the fact that after those brilliant January 6th hearings, which were portrayed beautifully by Michael Kirk and their Frontline documentary, Democracy on Trial, Kinzinger admitted to us, and he was on the January 6th committee, it didn't change anybody's mind. I mean, how frightening is that? They have 9 hearings, 8 hearings, whatever, brilliantly staged, almost all Trump-supporting witnesses saying what Trump had done that was damaging to this democracy.
Well, elaborate
and it
on
changed
that.
Nothing.
The people that thought he was guilty were affirmed in their feelings, or the people who thought he did nothing?
Nothing changed. That's what Kinzinger agreed. Sadly, it changed nobody's minds, despite the brilliance of the hearings. In any case, Chuck in a car, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Hey.
Hi, how you doing this morning?
Excellent.
Jim, what you were saying, I had seen a piece in the Times or the Post, and it was a survey of sentiment of Americans on how the economy was doing, correlated with what party was in office.
Right.
So for the past 40 years and increasingly in the past 20, Republicans reported the economy was worse than it statistically was when there was a Democrat in the president's office.
I know. You're right.
And Democrats reported more fairly on, even if it was Donald Trump, they said, hey, the economy's doing okay.
Yeah, but can I tell you something? Chuck, you're embracing Marjorie's view, with which I mostly agree. However, almost 50% of Democrats think that Biden is not doing a good job on the economy. It's either 46 or 49%. So there is a piece of the population that doesn't fit into your and Marjorie's analysis, Chuck.
I didn't mean to talk over you, but I think that goes to your overall, that the zone is flooded constantly to all of us, Democrat or Republican, with Republicans talking points that have nothing to do with reality, that migrants are flooding into the country and killing people, and the economy is horrible. And even Democrats are susceptible to, hey, I think I heard on the radio someone saying the economy is going down when it's going up. And they don't even realize where the supposed information is coming from. And it's increasingly tainted by, let's admit, Republicans who aren't really telling the exact truth because of their partisanship.
Chuck, it was an excellent call. Thank you very much. Speaking of Republicans telling a partisan story, I know we're going to talk to somebody about this later. What do you think about Joe Biden passing on an opportunity to speak to 120 million Americans with nobody on the other side? Softball questions right at not halftime, right before the Super Bowl, when a president is always given an opportunity and he turns it down. What is that about?
I don't know why he's doing that, because I think it would be a good opportunity for him to be before millions of people that are going to watch the Super Bowl.
Half the population.
Yeah, I don't get that. And I don't think it's because what you think it is, that they're worried he can't talk.
So what is it?
I don't know. I don't know, because he just gave this, this barn burner diatribe against Trump in a speech a couple of days ago. So
which about 8 people heard.
Yeah.
And as opposed to half of America watching the damn Super Bowl, being in a pretty good mood. And again, if you have watched those interviews with presidents, which is now a tradition, they're mostly soft questions, which allow you to sort of pump the good news in your administration.
Here's an interesting point. It's not about the difference between the Trump and Biden economy. It's the long-term erosion of the middle class and ludicrous levels of wealth inequality. We all feel worse off than we should be when a dozen eggs cost $10. Although eggs are really down. I even get you can even get the cage.
That is
free.
Perfect, though. Read what the person said.
A dozen eggs cost $10.
Right.
Because I'm guilty about the chickens. I get the pasture-raised ones, and those are more expensive, and those are even down to
those have always been more expensive.
Yeah, but they're down. They're down to like, you can get them $5, sometimes $4, sometimes $6. But anyway, Biden just suffered a timing issue with the greedflation that Trump didn't have. And the erosion of the middle class is a big issue. We were talking yesterday about the incredible story about, Steward Healthcare going out of business with all these hospitals all around Massachusetts.
By the way, they're not going out of business as of the moment.
They're
just
not.
So we don't scare
they're not,
people,
but they have
right?
big-time financial problems.
They do, big time.
And meanwhile, Brian McGrory, that great column in the Globe, but the guy that used to run the place, having a 190-foot yacht. I mean,
he still runs the place.
That is just a terrible juxtaposition for people. And as we said a million times, and Republicans talk about how much they love Ronald Reagan. Well, Ronald Reagan fooled everybody about trickle-down economics, which we have figured out now 40 years later doesn't work. But that's what began the erosion of the middle class, is the idea that you just give more and more money to the people at the top, and they'll give more and more money to the people in the middle, and that is not...
Well, in all fairness, the guy who's head of Steward is giving more money to the people who work on his yacht. So... Let's go to Eric. You should read Brian McGrory's column if you haven't. It's still posted online in the Globe. Eric and Eastie, welcome to the show. Hi.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
So I've got the answer, and it's basically going back to what that guy just wrote in. Basically, if you have to buy anything, I don't care if it's groceries, dry cleaning, a house, everything costs double, sometimes triple, and that's really the issue at the end of the day.
But everything doesn't cost double and sometimes triple. Some things are still up. But inflation has been cut by more than half the rate.
It's way down.
Since it's high. And as Marjorie said, eggs and gas are what we hear about. I bought eggs at Market Basket 2 days ago for $3 for a dozen. So how do you respond to that, Eric?
I would say the light that I'm living, that might be your situation, but everything for me, my car insurance just doubled. My dry cleaning has doubled. I got Greek food the other night. It cost me $30. It was just a takeout, nothing order. I need to live today, not 2 years from now. I can't make it. I make a six-figure salary. There's a lot of people in my position, and that is the reality.
I got it. Eric,
Well,
thank you
Eric,
much.
just
I'm
one
sorry.
last thing. I wonder how much. Are you a Massachusetts guy? You live here, locally?
I'm a Boston guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Boston guy. How much does the cost of living of rent and mortgaging and housing costs factor into your life?
Huge.
Yeah, huge.
Interest rates got up to 8% at one point. They've come down a bit, but they're still more than double what they were just about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think around here, and I think if you're young, and I don't know how old you are, Eric, but if you're young, you don't remember that interest rates used to be like 17% for a lot of people
Eric,
when they were buying.
when did you buy the place you live?
2022.
Okay, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Rates went up when they were at their lower at 3%.
Well,
Yeah.
Then I understand it. Eric, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
But I think around here, that's the huge issue is housing.
What did you say? I didn't read Beth Teitel's column. What did she write about?
Oh, she wrote about this
in the Globe.
This is great. It's down. I think it's down near Downtown Crossing or somewhere down around there. Maybe it's the financial district. Anyway, there's this high-rise building, and you should check it out in the Globe today. 400 square feet. $900,000.
Condo.
$900,000, yeah. And I guess they have nice amenities in the building. They have a nice gym and they have stuff like that. But
you can't lie down in your apartments. You have to lie down in the gym, obviously.
You can't lie down. And it's got one window. It's a big window, but it's one window, $900,000. Don from Bellingham, thank you for calling.
Hello, Don.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
First time, long time.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to actually repeat what Eric said. I think when people refer to the economy in polls or whatever, I think probably they mean prices. And I understand you say that inflation has come down, but inflation is really the increase of prices. So them being increased from 2-3 years ago, they're not going to go down. They're going to stay where they are. And I don't know if you saw, there was an interview on 60 Minutes with Jerome Powell.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the specific questions that was asked was prices. And he said prices are not going to go down. He says inflation's getting in check, and it has come down, but prices themselves will not come down overall unless there's a very, very bad turn in the economy, which will be worse for everybody.
You know, by the way, I'm glad you clarified that. I mean, obviously prices are going to continue to go up, but when inflation rate is lower, as it is now, they're going to go up by less than they were going up when the inflation number was spiking and the Fed was raising interest rates. But I mean, what Don is basically saying, and that was an excellent first call, Don, is it's personal. It's about your personal economy. Having said that, I would hope that people have some ability to see outside themselves. This is not a narrow margin for Trump over Biden. Again, Trump's major accomplishment on the economy didn't benefit any of the people who've called today, I don't think anyway. It benefited high-end millionaires and some billionaires in this country. Unemployment, inflation, growth are all moving in the right direction. Same things. No one's calling about this illegal activity thing. Those numbers haven't moved either, despite the fact that there have been 91 criminal indictments of the former president. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Don, thanks for the call.
This texter is really down to the pennies on the cost of foods. They said they go to the grocery store horrified. I bought a navel orange. It cost me $1.20. I bought 2 organic apples, almost $3 at Thanksgiving. They're going way back to 2023. On Thanksgiving, I bought 2 Asian pears that cost $6.40. Wow, that's a pretty impressive memory of what you spent for these oranges and
You ever buy a
fruit.
Sumo orange at Whole Foods?
Yeah, those are really expensive.
It's like $34
yeah,
for
they're
an
ridiculous.
orange.
Yeah, dry cleaners have always been expensive too. You have to learn to iron, Eric. That's the deal. You have to learn to iron when to go to dry cleaners all the time.
Look at me.
Yeah, 877-301-8970 is the number. We are talking about people's feelings about the economy. Is it just because if you like Biden, then you're willing to give him a benefit of the doubt in the economy? If you like Trump, you're going to stick with the Trump economy no matter what? 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. What day is today? Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Next, on the part of the voters, none of the callers agree with me so far, not just on the economy, which by almost every objective measure is improving. I'm not saying people are not still having difficulty paying for certain necessities in their lives. And the thing that really struck me, which we will talk more to John King about later, was the CNN poll that came out yesterday that showed between the time when there were no indictments of Donald Trump and today when there are 91 criminal indictments, there is zero change among Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, zero, about whether or not he's committed responsible for any illegal activity. And it suggests to me that we don't give a damn about the facts, but the callers disagree.
And one of the things you got to take into consideration, too, is during the pandemic, we talked a lot about how people were basically paid absolutely unlivable wages, certainly like in fast food places where the wages have gone up, or in restaurants where the wages have gone up. And sometimes you go out to dinner now and they have a tax for or a charge for service, right, checked onto your bill. I think that people notice that a lot, but I guess the question is, are you willing to pay a little bit more for your fast food or even to go out to dinner?
Do you think they noticed during the pandemic that their unemployment checks were dramatically increased during the pandemic? Do you think they understood that these PPP programs and all these other programs allowed their small businesses, including Tom Brady's formerly across the street, to survive? And we have the memories of gnats. I mean, we just do.
But I think that's a factor that I don't want to pay people minimum wage that are working at Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's.
I understand that, but obviously some of the people who are saying the economy is horrible now and was much better under Trump benefited from the largesse of the federal government under Joe Biden during the pandemic. Obviously, it doesn't matter.
Here's Pat in Dedham. Jim, this one's for you. The loss of facts can be traced back at least as far as Newt Gingrich's famous quote, "Feelings are facts," greenlighting the alternative facts movement.
I didn't know that. That's a great quote, by the way. That feelings are facts. I mean, they really...
Kellyanne Conway, she kind of segued that into
But we focused almost on the economy.
Facts.
How about it responding to my thing about the illegal activity? How do you explain that one?
I don't know.
Independents are not all for Donald Trump.
All I know is that talking to people, and these were Trump people up in New Hampshire, they didn't believe any of this stuff. They thought it was a witch hunt, that they thought all these people, even they were, judges and juries that seemed to be straight shooters as far as I could see. They thought that they were just all
So
set
90% of them
Biden.
didn't believe it before the indictments, and 90% of them don't believe it after the indictments.
That is correct.
That's troubling. Would you not agree?
I think it's troubling.
I think that's troubling.
Well, what was this number today? That only 34% of people or something have any faith in the United States Supreme Court.
Well,
42%
that
trust
is
the United States
fact-based.
Supreme. Well, it is fact-based, but I think that's kind of a big problem too, because they are supposedly the highest court in the land. You see down in Texas with Judge Abbott, Governor Abbott defying the Supreme Court on the razor wire they've got at the border, and a lot of the Republican governors agree with him. So I guess defying orders from the Supreme Court are okay now too. Virginia and Dorchester, thank you for calling.
Welcome, Virginia.
Oh, thank you. Long-time listener. I love the show.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Jim. I think that the issue really is that the Democrats stink at public campaigns and talking points, and the Republicans just do a much better job. Sometimes I think the Republicans are running the Democratic National Committee's campaign because it's so poor. And that, nobody's talking about these increased profit margins by these companies that are really one of the biggest causes for inflation and these price hikes, and why we're all suffering. Why all these companies are buying housing and really pushing the middle class out of buying house, first-time home buyers, because these companies are buying all the housing. And so we're losing sight of the real problem and talking about it in a real way that can get to real people.
Virginia,
that is a great point about private equity company. We're talking about these private firms buying up.
We did that a couple of weeks ago, right here.
Yes, or even private dental practices, private physicians' practices, or these major hospitals becoming for-profit instead of non-profit. Private equity is doing a real number, obviously, as Virginia just said, on the cost of housing.
Virginia, thank you much for the call. And by the way, I don't mean to be Johnny One Note, but I always am. Maybe Joe Biden, had he deigned to agree to that CBS interview. CBS, I think, halftime of this, right before the Super Bowl, could have talked about the things that Virginia's talking about with no opportunity for the other side to respond. How many times in America, even if you're a sitting president, do you get an opportunity where no one can respond? It's Super Bowl day. People are drinking, eating with their family and friends. The whole day is Super Bowl day, and you have an unvarnished, unedited opportunity to spend 15 minutes talking to the American people,
we should mention
and he rejected it.
The excuse he made was that they didn't want to have politics injected into the...
Do you buy that?
I think he's making a mistake. I think he should talk.
Do you buy his excuse? That he doesn't want politics? By the way,
I don't buy yours. I don't buy yours.
You don't have to give you don't have to give a political talk. You can do a feel-good talk to show your compassion for the American people who are watching the damn football game.
You can talk about concussions in the NFL.
We're going to talk about that with Trenni in a minute. That is also a disgrace. You know, if it weren't for Taylor Swift, I wouldn't even watch the Super Bowl. 877-301-8970 is number. Where are we going, friends? John in Westford. Hey, John.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm one of those people that think Trump is innocent. I think a lot of these charges are ridiculous. The one, for example, who he inflated the numbers. I mean, the bank agreed that this is what the property is worth. He agreed that that's what it's worth. The state also agreed. The property tax agreed with it. So I don't understand.
Well, he was lying. He was lying to the government. That's one of the reasons, and lying to the banks.
Well,
that's one of the reasons.
It's tax fraud.
Why the state.
It's tax fraud.
And by the way,
John,
that's not a criminal case. That, as you know, that's a civil case. And we're waiting for the. How about the fact? Let's talk one where the evidence I think is pretty. How about the documents thing in Mar-a-Lago that he just took boxes and then he hid them and then he lied and all these. That no crime there either.
Well, when the FBI went there the first time, and they saw all of the boxes, and they said, we're going to take just these. You keep these, but you change the lock on the door, which was kind of ridiculous because there was another outer lock and Secret Service.
Wait a minute, John. I never heard anything like that.
Go ahead, John. Keep it. That's good. Go ahead. What else? What does that have to do with the fact, even if what you say is true, which neither of us have heard of, what does it have to do with the fact that without any permission, he took classified documents and then they lied to the government, the Justice Department about him, right? And he had to be subpoenaed to give them back. I mean, that doesn't bother you?
They had access to it all along. That's the whole thing. But every president has taken documents. And aren't they declassified?
No, John.
That, by the way, even though some have, including Joe Biden, some few, they are absolutely not declassified unless the president acts to do them. And when it was made clear that Donald Trump had never declassified the documents, his argument was, I thought about it, and because I thought that I would declassify them, they became declassified. John, before you hang up, though, when you spoke to our colleague, the call screener, you don't think Trump's guilty, but your wife does. How's that going in your house?
What's that?
How's that?
Oh, not bad at all. We don't take politics. It's not an. How should I put it? I feel like most people they identify themselves. They use politics as an identity.
I understand
That's why if I say everything becomes a personal attack.
Okay, so does your wife still love you? That's what I want to know. Yes or no?
It's still working out, as far as I know.
I'm glad. John, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. As far as he knows, that's fine. Are you, I mean, that's a good example there.
As I said, I mean, you have the prominent television station in America got fined close to $1 billion for lying about the election. They lie about lots of stuff.
Are they saying that he declassified the documents? I don't know because I don't watch it. Are they saying he declassified, like John said a second ago?
I don't watch enough to know exactly their story, but you get people texting us and calling us and telling us things that aren't true. That aren't true. So getting it from somewhere, and I assume it's either from them or from talk radio, from their Facebook feed, or something like that. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think sometimes it's very hard for people to tell what's true, what's not true. But I would say, in general, if you want to hear what's true, do not listen to Fox News. That's a good place to start. But anyway, we are moving on. We're going to talk with our Trenni Casey.
That really relaxed me, that discussion.
Does it relax you?
I really feel a lot calmer now than I did at 11 o'clock.
You know, Theo Epstein, remember Theo Epstein? He was the boy wonder that got the first 2 World Series championships.
Well.
He had a lot to do with that. Well, he's coming back to the Red Sox. Can he breathe new life into the phoned-in franchise? And we're going to talk also about Bill Belichick's very un-Belichick full-page Globe ad thanking the fans around here for his many blessings while he was the head coach of the New England Patriots. Trenni Casey from NBC Sports Boston is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News. Friday, I'm really looking forward to this. We have featured players from the National Symphony of Ukraine joining us for Live Music Friday. We support Ukraine, even if our government does not, or at least the Republicans do not. And Tuesday next week, the mayor joins us here. Mayor Wu joins us at the library. We're joined out at the library by Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, and a BPR Weekly contributor. Hello there, Trenni.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, Trenni Casey. So let's start with the full-page ad that Bill Belichick took out in the Boston Globe, talking about how much he appreciated the fans. This was a little touchy-feely for Belichick, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't want to say he didn't write it himself, but I feel like most of these people have someone who writes these things for them, right? Or they have like a PR firm that does it. But he embraced it and he did it. And listen, it's become sort of commonplace, right? Like Patrice Bergeron does it, Tom Brady does it. If you leave a city that you've been for a long time. But what I do think is different about this is Tom Brady left on his own volition. Patrice Bergeron retired on his own. Other athletes who have left and taken out full page ads, usually they kind of do it on their own. This was, he got pushed out. You can call it a mutually agreeing, mutually agreed upon parting of ways, but he was fired. And he still did this, and he still had, took the time to reflect on his time here and the success that he had. I really do think that he has a fondness for the New England area. He loves Nantucket. He lives on Nantucket for part of the year. He was here for 20-some years. So, his kids, worked under him at the Patriots. So I don't think that this, while it was probably crafted by a PR firm, he had to sign off on it, and I think that it was genuine.
He writes, "You may have even enjoyed my fashion sense."
I did like that part,
and press conferences, or maybe you just tolerate him. A rare humor.
But he also
By the way,
said,
did you see what?
"I was blessed to feel your passion and your power," he said to the fans, which,
that's very nice.
Was quite touchy.
Did you see, is there a high school in Nantucket?
There is.
Yes.
I think I heard on the radio the other day.
They do. They have an opening. They have a head football coach.
And they offered him, or they want to offer him the job as the high school coach.
I think he should take it.
I do too.
I think it would be
totally.
What great PR for him. He doesn't want to do television, which everyone has kind of thrown out.
Who says he doesn't?
If he doesn't.
I'm sorry.
Because it's kind of been thrown out that that's like the next option for him, right? I mean, he'd make so much money. You get millions and millions of dollars to go talk about people on TV, but maybe he doesn't want to. at the heart of it, Bill Belichick loves football, and he loves teaching the game of football. And I honestly think, like, you know, for a guy who's sort of been chided as not connecting with the younger generation and kind of being surly and like this kind of gruff guy, to go and coach a high school football team, and that's like, honestly, he could do it for free. He could do it pro bono and just go and like kind of rediscover the love of the game. I don't know that he will. But honestly, like, what would it even interfere with? He could still spend his summer somewhere warm. He'd only have to be, he's on Nantucket anyway all summer. And usually high school football starts in like early August before school starts. And then they're done playing by like October and November, depending on how good they are. Like, he could be on a private yacht, you know, in the Caribbean by Thanksgiving.
I see him more of a high school powerhouse. I mean, I don't think of Nantucket as a powerhouse.
But that's what
team.
But isn't
and
that
maybe Brockton?
But he's
or
been
Catholic
there and
Memorial.
done that kind of. It's like a total different.
But if you're, I mean, honestly, no matter what he does, he's not going to do it. But like, you don't go to a powerhouse. Like, if you're Bill Belichick, you go to a team that is not a powerhouse, and like the whole reason he would do it isn't because he's trying to like turn this. Maybe he would try to turn a program around. He would do it because it's Nantucket, and that's like his home.
Can they bring the kids from the mainland to spruce up the team, or do they have to have the Nantucket crew right there?
I mean, I think kids have to go to Nantucket High to play on. I don't think you can like recruit from, you know, another town.
Okay, so he leaves Boston, and Theo sort of comes back.
Here we go.
Don't let her talk first, and I'll talk.
The Jim story about Theo Epstein. You got to get over this, Jim.
I'm not getting over it.
What happened with Theo Epstein?
I have to say, I've been doing this. No, I did not have a bad. No, excuse me.
I do remember this.
I've been doing this job. I've been doing media things for 25 years. I will say something with no fear of, what's the expression, of contradiction? Is that the expression? I have never met a ruder, more condescending human being in my life.
You know what? I do remember this.
Let me explain this, because Marjorie always gets it wrong. My former producer, who's now a selectman in your hometown of Brookline, John Van Scoik, my producer, sets up an interview for me with Theo Epstein in the weight room at the Red Sox when I was at NECN, maybe 15, 16, 17 years ago. I talked to a couple of prominent sports writers in town who said, you're going to hate this, you're going to hate it. And I said, I can tell jokes. He says, no jokes, whatever. So I interview Theo. He was incredibly rude and condescending to me, but this is the part where Margie gets wrong. I don't care about that. I've interviewed a lot of people who have treated me poorly. They're entitled to do whatever they want. Here's what he did that I will never forget. He didn't like the interview. By the way, I asked him no hard questions. He just didn't like the interview. As he's leaving, before he goes out in the hall, in front of me, my producer, and 2 camera people, he calls the PR person over in our presence and starts yelling for how dare you have set up this interview? Never do this kind of thing. And totally demeaning, I'm not done, Marjorie, totally demeaning this guy. He could have waited 5 seconds. He was at the door, taking him in the hall. Any human being with power who demeans a lower level employee who works for him and serves him in this case, to me, is indefensible. I don't care what a brilliant baseball mind is. He was a condescending a-hole. I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Well, he's back.
I want to tell that story again. Okay.
I mean, he's back, sort of. So Theo left Boston, obviously, on some not so great terms, ended up going to the Cubs, becoming the general manager there, leads them to their first World Series. Plus years.
It was like a Tom Brady type thing.
I know. He did in Chicago exactly what he did in Boston. Then he left the Cubs and he went to Major League Baseball to be like a special advisor. And then he left there. And so he's been working for this private equity firm whose main focus is investing in sports, particularly like minority investing and owning teams.
Know that. Okay.
So he is still working for, I think it's called like Arcor. I think is the name of the private equity firm that he is a partner with. So he works for Arcor. That's still going to be his full-time job, but he is now a part-time minority owner investor in Fenway Sports Group. So not the Red Sox. It is Fenway Sports Group, which entire entity includes their portfolio.
But they own the Red Sox.
They own the Red Sox. They own Liverpool. They own the Pittsburgh Penguins. They own Nesson. And they also now own the sports regional in Pittsburgh.
But wasn't he at some point the boss of the guy who is now the head of baseball operations, Craig, whatever his name is?
Craig Breslow, yep, he was in Chicago. So the feeling among baseball people, though Sam Kennedy disputed this notion yesterday at Truck Day, which got somebody's there said there were 50 to 75 people. We think about 50 of those 75 people were Sox employees, but
this
whatever.
This is when they take all the equipment to Florida.
Yeah, this is when they take the equipment. Like, there were days where it was like 7 people deep and you couldn't get through, and it was like hoopla, right? Like cameras everywhere. I had a laugh yesterday. We ran some sound with Sam Kennedy, and we ran it, our news arm, NECN and NBC 10 went and got it, and it's literally like the photographer saying, and they told me to ask you, Sam, and they asked him about like spending money, and I'm like, oh my God, we sent this poor photographer out to like ask, but they're not even important enough that we would send a reporter
that
anymore.
That is incredible.
But Sam Kennedy was at some juncture yesterday asked if, whether or not Theo is coming in to sort of save the Red Sox, and he said that Theo is not going to have any day-to-day activities. He's not going back to the Red Sox front office, but Mass Live did report yesterday that the thinking is that the Red Sox have not paid enough attention, or the Fenway Sports Group has not paid enough attention to the Red Sox, so they're hoping Theo can sort of bridge that gap. And the whole thing with Theo is he does know baseball, he does know Craig Breslow, and he definitely has the ear and the respect of John Henry and Tom Werner in ways that I imagine Sam Kennedy and Craig Breslow
Can I be clear here also? I will acknowledge, even though he is the rudest person I've ever interviewed in my life.
I've actually never met him or interviewed him.
The rudest.
That was
the
like,
guy,
maybe he's improved. He's 50 years old
maybe
now.
Maybe he has. Having said that, the guy is going in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he did. He was the leader who broke the 84-year-old curse here, not winning a championship. He goes to the Cubs, and they hadn't won in like 110 years or 105 years
like 100,
or something.
Why was the number 118 in my head?
Maybe it was. But whatever it was, the guy broke 2 curses, and he's a brilliant baseball mind. He should just treat people a little bit better than he does. So, speaking of treating people, this concussion thing,
NFL.
Every time there's a story about... Can you give us a brief summary of what the latest findings are? And then let's talk about it.
Okay, so the Washington Post, which has done tremendous work, tremendous reporting, really over the last couple of years into how the NFL treats its former players and this concussion settlement they came to. So they, agreed to terms with the Players Association to pay out athletes who were suffering from, various dementias, Alzheimer's, ALS, mental health, anything that could be tied and linked to football. But the Washington Post did it. I mean, it was a long article. If you want to get the gist of it, you can read Sally Jenkins also wrote a great scathing column about the way the NFL treats their players. But the crux of it is that, yes, they have paid out $1.2 billion to NFL players, but so many of these guys go in and try to get a settlement, and they're denied. They are denied any sort of medical coverage. And this is one thing that I guess stupidly I didn't know, but right now, if you are an NFL player, after retirement, you get health care from the NFL for 5 years following retirement. Yeah. After that, you're on your own for health care. So if your brain and body have been damaged to the point of no return, the NFL is not on the hook. You're not on an insurance plan. You have to pay out of pocket or have someone in your household that has insurance. But the thing that really killed me in this article, Jim and Marjorie, was that the NFL has a different level. So one of the most common things that happen to these ball players who have undiagnosed CTE, which you can't diagnose while someone is alive, is dementia. And there are two sort of levels of it. And if you go into your doctor, they will diagnose you, like, let's say you have trouble finding your words cognitively, but you can still drive a car, you can still exercise. Those are sort of 2 different buckets for dementia. Mm-hmm. A medical doctor will say you are suffering from dementia if you can no longer drive, but you can read, or vice versa. The NFL makes you have 2 basically symptoms in 2 different buckets in order for them to say you qualify for our benefits. So what it does is it disqualifies thousands of football players from ever receiving this money, and it's saving the NFL hundreds of millions of dollars.
Let me make it a little bit worse here, if I possibly can. Many of the former players who suffer from dementia, who've been denied benefits, come after the NFL's own doctors and the concussion network. I'm going to repeat, the NFL's own doctors have approved them for benefits. Their doctors approve them, and then the next step up, They're denied. And in the case, they do a really painful story. Sally
Don
Jenkins
Maynard.
mentions.
Yeah.
He was, for
Don
those who are
Maynard.
too
Yeah.
young, Joe Namath you've all heard of. When Joe Namath was winning Super Bowl III, his great receiver was this guy, Don Maynard. To make a long story short, he suffered from dementia. When did he finally get his benefits?
After
a few
he died.
months after he died.
3 days.
3 days was it
After he died.
And there's one other thing that I just want to get out of my system.
It's not clear he ever got him. They just said he qualified.
The appalling Roger Goodell is quoted. I don't know if it's in the Washington Post story or by Sally Jenkins.
It is. I
Here's
think
his
it's in
line.
both.
Here's his line. There's still uncertainty about causation. There are risks to playing football. You ready for this? But there are risks to walking down the street, too. So the risks of walking down the street to
You
Roger
never know.
Goodell.
I mean, you could be walking down the street, hit on the head by a potted plant, at every block.
Or a 280-pound
linebacker.
piece of muscle linebacker.
Do you know what I love about Sally Jenkins' column is she suggests in this column, and I think that it sounds silly, right? But these billionaire owners, I mean, they're so up each other's butts about being in the Hall of Fame. And she suggests that they should withhold allowing any owner into the Hall of Fame going forward until the owners come together and decide to revisit the way that this plan is laid out.
I agree.
Because that, you know what, these guys, you can hit them in the wallet all you want. They make so much money, they don't even know what to do with all of the money that they make. But you take away an accolade from something like Robert Kraft desperately wants to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, I think part of the reason that I sort of understand that he and Jerry Jones kind of have
Dallas Cowboys
the
owner.
Dallas Cowboys owner have sort of a friction-laden relationship is Jerry Jones is in the Hall of Fame and Robert Kraft is not in the Hall of Fame yet, and he feels like he should be, obviously based on all of the success that the Patriots have had versus, say, the Cowboys. And it's like, if you say, you know what, you can't go in, and Robert Kraft is a very, very powerful owner in the NFL. He has been integral in getting television deals done, avoiding labor disputes. So this is someone who has a lot of pull. You say to him, you know what, you want to be in the Hall of Fame? We're not putting you in the Hall of Fame until you start taking care of the players that have been damaged by your product for years.
I want to celebrate.
I think that would be something. I think it's a great suggestion by Sally Jenkins.
You have no choice but to watch. Marjorie and I, I'm sure, will be watching the Super Bowl. You know who will not be watching the Super Bowl for this, among other reasons? Emmett G. Price III, who does not watch pro football, even though he loves it.
He is a man of principle.
So speaking of principle, this is like an underreported thing. It was mentioned in the Globe. The athletes at Dartmouth College have been classified as employees at their request by the National Labor Relations Board, thus can unionize and negotiate a contract with Dartmouth. And the feeling, which I share, is if this holds up on appeal, it is very likely that athletes across the country are going to organize college athletes into unions and not only negotiate whatever benefits they get when they practice, how much it interferes or doesn't with their schoolwork. This is huge, potentially.
It is huge. And this is different. So Northwestern athletes also tried to do this. But apparently
like a decade ago.
No, not even a decade ago. It wasn't really that long ago.
I didn't know that.
I want to say it was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But they didn't, for whatever reason, there was just a slight difference in the classification of the lawsuit. And this one, and I think Dartmouth football players, or was it basketball players?
Basketball players.
Basketball players learned from what Northwestern did, and they classified, Northwestern didn't ask to be like employees. Dartmouth suggested they are employees of the university because of the money they bring in. Now, there were some interesting, like, I don't know if it'll hold up on appeal, but right now they can at least start to unionize and start to take a look at maybe like the benefits that they would want. Is that a Stanley Cup?
It is not a Stanley Cup.
Even though a lot of people think it is.
It has been mistaken for a Stanley Cup. Those are very, very hip to have Stanley Cups.
It is. I was like, wow, look at
Marjorie.
Marjorie.
Did you read about the lead content in Stanley Cups the other day?
Yes.
Sorry, that was like squirrel.
Go ahead. No, it's fine.
What I did find interesting that I don't know if it was an attorney or just someone who understands labor relations suggested is at what point though, let's say they win on appeal and Dartmouth and then all these other universities can start to unionize. Where do you stop? Right? So now do musicians who are at the College of Berkeley and put on concerts, are they able to unionize? And I immediately thought of like theater programs. So if you're an actor, an actress, or someone who is stage design and all these things, and the university is charging people to come see your theater production, can you unionize and can you get paid a portion of whatever you make off of? To me, this could have big ramifications across the board. And I think it could go beyond just sports.
Well, we tried to find out this morning. We asked Hannah to check this out, our colleague. There's a guy who runs college sports in this country. He used to be on our show every month. Charlie Baker. I'm curious to know where the governor, former governor, is on the unionization issue. We couldn't find anything. Have you?
I have not seen anything comment. The most recent comments I saw from him were just sort of talking about, I don't know how closely everybody pays attention to college football and college basketball, but mostly college football. Like, all of these schools are just bolting from these different conferences, and they're really going into two really super conferences.
He was critical of it, wasn't he?
Yes, which is like Big Ten and the SEC. Yeah. And so he's talking about maybe there could be different tiers, but if there's different tiers, then is there different, pay? I mean, I don't know, but I think we're in for a change of the college sports landscape that we've never seen before.
We saw the beginning of the change with the names, images, and likenesses. Okay, so here is a clip of Fox News anchor Judge Jeanine Pirro, one of Marjorie's favorite judges, arguing that Taylor Swift should not get involved in politics. Here she is.
Are less likely to vote for someone she chooses. So they cancel each other out. Yeah. So don't get involved. Don't get involved in politics. We don't want to see you there.
They don't want to see her there.
Of course they don't want to see her there, because she has a ton of influence right now. And she has brought people, like, this is just so wild to me. Like,
why are they even doing this?
Well, because they're scared. Honestly, I think Republicans are worried that I think, and listen, I listen to you guys all the time, so I hear all of your political analysts. And when you guys were up in New Hampshire, I don't remember who was on your program, but they made a great point that, like, it's so much about getting people out to vote. Because right now, people, especially young Democrats, are not all that enthusiastic about Joe Biden being the candidate. But I think what hardcore Republicans are worried about is that if Taylor Swift comes out and says, I'm for Biden, and she's wearing Biden shirt, I mean, everything she touches turns to gold. Did you guys see the numbers in Kansas City? How
huge.
Like the numbers for the Grammys? So like last, it was like one of the biggest markets in the country for the Grammys. Like, it saw like this exponentially huge jump in the number of viewers from last year to this year, simply because she's dating their tight end. Like, I saw another statistic that her brand recognition for the NFL has gone up or the Kansas City Chiefs has gone up like $300 million since she started dating. Like, she has influence, and that is terrifying, I think, to a side that knows that young people tend to lean more center and left of center. And,
you can bet on whether she's going to kiss.
But I like how they're trying.
Kelsey.
I love how they're trying like reverse psychology. Like, you know what? You shouldn't get involved anyway. It just cancels them out. It's like your mom. No, really, go ahead and drink. It's great when you puke in your shoes. It's great. You should just go have some cocktails with your friends.
You can bet on whether she and Kelsey will kiss on the field.
Oh, you can
bet on whether he will propose to her.
He's not going to propose to her on the field. Take the no on that. It's probably like a minus 3,000. There's no way.
Okay.
Or it's probably plus 3,000. Sorry.
Trenni, Casey, thank you very much. You probably have to work all Super Sunday. You don't have a...
No, I mean, like, I have to watch the game, but I don't have to work. I don't have a show.
Oh, good. So do you have a special Super Sunday routine that you do, being a sports person as you are?
No. We're going to Sunday River with some friends.
Oh,
and then,
skiing.
My brother-in-law is in town, so we're going to have dinner, and then we're going to just watch the game, hang out.
Who's going to win?
Busy. I think the Chiefs are going to win.
Because of Mahomes.
But I don't know. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers, that's a really good team. I mean, Brock Purdy has done nothing to hurt them. So there's, I think it'll be a good Super Bowl. I'm pulling for the Chiefs, though, because I put a little money on them a long time ago, so I could win a little money.
Okay. Trenni Casey, anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston, BPR contributor. Thank you very much. Coming up after the new news, we're going to talk with Carol Rose from the ACLU of Massachusetts about a federal appeals court rejecting Trump's immunity claims and a long-awaited discussion of what's in the immigration border deal, which apparently is going nowhere, but we'll talk about it anyway. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
In 2015, the state deemed the district chronically underperforming and placed it under state control. In September, the Holyoke School Committee petitioned the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESE, saying enough progress had been made to take back local control. In a letter from DESE Commissioner Jeff Riley to Holyoke Mayor Joshua Garcia, Riley said more conversations needed to take place and deferred action on the request. Aaron Brunel is vice chair of the school board.
I don't think any of us expected him to say, oh, sure, yes, you can have your schools back tomorrow, but we were all hoping for a willful transition phase.
The school committee is scheduled to meet next week to discuss what it will do next. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Adam Franier.
He is Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. And we have a few programming notes here. On Friday, we're going to be joined by the featured players joining the National Symphony of Ukraine. They're going to join us for Live Music Friday. And a week from today, 11 o'clock, the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, will be here to take questions from us and from you guys at the library for an hour. I think it's from, 11 to 12.
Yep.
Hello again, Jim.
Hi there, Marjorie. We're joined now at the library by Carol Rose. Carol, of course, is the executive director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. She joins us monthly. Hello, Carol.
Hello. Good to be here.
Nice to see you.
Hey, Carol. So, finally, this appeals this appeals court has rejected the former president's notion that he was immune from charges to subvert the results of the 2020 election because he was the president of the United States. This isn't, of course, the end of this, but it's a start. So what happens after this?
So this is good news, just breaking this morning, actually mid-morning. So this is the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal, so it's the court just below the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled that Donald Trump is not immune from prosecution for the alleged crimes that he committed during his presidency when he was trying to challenge the 2020 election results. And it's interesting to hear what the court wrote, and I think it's important for all of us to pay attention to it. They said, quote, "For the purpose of this criminal case, former President Trump has become Citizen Trump with all of the defenses and any other criminal defendant. But any executive immunity that may have protected him while he served as president no longer protects him against this prosecution," the court wrote. So that's really important because, you know, there's been efforts, whether it's Richard Nixon saying if the president does it, it's not illegal. But, you know, we fought a revolution not to have a king. And in our country, in America, no one is above the law. And I think this is a really important ruling for that reason.
Sorry, I disagree. The witch hunt, obviously a witch hunt.
But the crucial question to me is, okay, we were supposed to have a trial starting March 4th with Jack Smith that now has been delayed. What is this going to mean for moving the immunity case ahead?
Well, so my guess is that Trump is going to appeal, and so it'll go up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
No, he's first going to appeal to the full appellate
Right, he'll do an en banc,
and
then, so there's going to be a series of delay tactics. And so the real danger is, in fact, that the trial won't start, or it'll be so close to the time of the election that the judge will decide to put it off.
Here's what I don't get. Whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, it would be a good idea to solve some of these things before he's running for re-election.
Absolutely.
I don't get why there isn't some, I don't know who would do it, but somebody's saying, we need dates, you know, we need this thing, because the prospect of his being re-elected and then pardoning himself is a really frightening prospect.
So this is an instance in a new twist on the notion of justice delayed is justice denied. And it's justice for the American people who deserve to know what, in fact, this person did.
But there's no sense that anybody's assuring that happens.
No, well, that's because it would be really up to the courts to do that. And the judges and the courts are not moving as quickly as I think we wish they would. And I wish the prosecutors had moved more quickly.
It seems like somebody should come and step over, and I don't know how you do it, but the fact that
Taylor Swift could do it.
Taylor Swift could do it. That we're just sort of, cruising along like this is normal business. This is not normal business.
Yeah, I don't think anybody thinks it's normal. I think there is a sense of crisis and a sense of urgency.
Yeah, it did.
I know, but
By the way, are we not right? We have praised the Supreme Court for at least the 60, whatever number of cases got to them around 2020. They did expedite almost everything, right? So once this immunity thing gets there,
we hope they'll do the same thing.
And by the way, Thursday, are they not the oral argument on the Colorado
on
decision,
the disqualification clause is also coming up, right?
So and that's directly to the. I mean,
that's directly to the and that's
Supreme
directly
Court.
to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's going to be interesting too, to see whether or not the court actually uses the constitutional provision meant to prevent insurrectionists from getting into power to prevent him from doing it. I will tell you what I'm hearing from the legal pundits trying to read the tea leaves is they're likely to try to find some sort of a way out, whether they might raise issues of whether it applies to the president, right? Whether it's self-executing or does it require an act of Congress?
I mean, this is Section 3 of Article of
on the disqualification. So I think I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm saying my guess is the court's going to do that, but I think the court will not rule that he has total immunity, that a president has total immunity, because that would just be really such a blow to our democracy.
Well, it's not going to matter what they do if they don't do it fast enough.
That's true.
I mean, that's sort of the bottom, and I don't get why there isn't some. But what do? Change.org petition or something?
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just say, yes, you talk about it on your show. You ask people to sign those petitions. You tell people to contact their elected officials. Democracy works when we raise our voices, when we tell our elected officials what we want, when we talk about it in the press. Frankly, judges, and they're just people, and they read the headlines too. So I do think it's important, and I'm so glad you're asking about it, because the more we put it on the agenda, the more likely it is that the courts will respond.
By the way, we've asked about it every day, and every day we ask to get slower. So that's. I don't think we've had quite the impact.
I don't know that if Judge Alito and Clarence Thomas is listening to us, but it's just really almost insane to think that they could let this thing slide.
It is insane. I agree with you.
And I think that there's a lot of reason for people on the Supreme Court to let it slide.
Carol, you may not know the answer to this question, so why am I asking it? You might know the answer to the question. So Chutkan, the judge in the
trial court,
it's not technically an insurrection, but you know what I mean. The January 6th case put off the March 4th date until these issues are resolved.
Correct.
Does she have the power to say to the lawyers, keep doing whatever you do to prepare for trial, if they're deposit, whatever it is, so that you don't tell me when I establish a court date, we got to now start preparing for this thing. I don't mean internal preparation. Obviously, they can do that. But depositions, whatever they're entitled
discovery,
to do,
interrogatories,
can move ahead while they're doing
the civil procedure parts of the trial should and can move forward, and the judge has the authority and the power to order that.
Because obviously the documents case judge, she's already shown her colors here, Eileen Cannon down in Florida. She's going to slow walk this as long as possible.
She's apparently seems quite beholden to the former president.
Yeah.
So can I ask one last question about this appeal thing? This you can appeal to the full appellate court, not just the 3-judge panel. By the way, one of the judges was a Republican, if you're wondering, not a Trump-appointed Republican, and George H.W. Bush appointed Republican, 2 Democrats of the 3.
A conservative, an actual conservative.
Yeah. Can the full appellate court deny a request for the full court? So they could say no.
Right.
You got to go right to the Supreme Court. Okay.
They can. They can do that.
Okay, so I figure if it took months for 3 people to decide, it could take 2 months for the whole bunch of them to decide. How many justices are on the appeals court, the full court, en banc, as we say? Could be 2 months. So that'll bring us to April. And then we'll have the Supreme Court will have till June. So the case will start in September. That's what.
And then they'll say it's too close to the election.
I think that's too close to the election.
I think that's the strategy.
It is the
Donald
strategy.
Trump's legal team has. that doesn't mean it's going to work. Just because we can see it doesn't mean it'll work. And again, I know you all don't think you're as influential as you are, but
we are.
I think you are hugely influential. And I think the more we talk about it in our political and public discourse, the better off it is. Because the judges.
Why don't you ask our audience, when Margie and I say something, do you all just do it?
Yeah.
2 thumbs up, that one woman who was obviously out of it in the back. Thank you very much.
Okay.
My gosh, Jim, there was one person in the entire audience.
Sad state of affairs. It's too late.
Okay, take it back. You have no
influence. Guy act fast.
Okay, so what do we know about this immigration border deal, even though it seems like it's not going to get anywhere? I know people on the right are upset about it. People prefer not wanting to help Trump. People are on the left because they think it is too stringent against those that are coming into the country seeking asylum.
Well, this is just such a frustrating situation because I think we all know that we need to do something about the crisis on the border. But I think trying to out-Trump Trump is not the way to do it by coming in with really draconian measures. We know that it doesn't stop people from coming. It just makes them come in other ways, and not at legal crossings, but at illegal ones where they are more likely to die or be subject to human trafficking. And we know that because during the Trump administration, we here at the ACLU of Massachusetts filed a number of cases challenging Title 42 and some of the things that are going to come back. And, the stories are so heartbreaking. We had one client, Nora, and she was coming over with her 2 kids and got pushed back into a camp where they were subjected to all sorts of horrible violence. And finally, she sent the kids across, little kids, on their own, unaccompanied minors, so that they could at least get to safety. People who have traveled this far and are desperate enough that they're willing to try to come to our borders, they won't be deterred just because you set up new rules. They're going to go to other places and create a real, humanitarian disaster. But the even equally terrifying thing is that this has really just become subject to presidential politics already. So we know that Biden and Schumer and that team put together, and it was basically a trade, that if we agree to be draconian at the border, that you'll give us aid for Ukraine, for Israel, and for Gaza humanitarian relief. And the Republicans are willing to do that to get this win on immigration.
No, they're not.
But then Trump contacts the House Speaker, so this is the Senate making the deal. Trump contacts Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, and says, I don't want this to happen because I don't want Biden to be able to say he's tough on the border from an election point of view. So he announces it's DOA, it's dead on arrival.
But you don't support the thing anyway because you think it's draconian.
I don't, but the notion that, number one, that we're all playing presidential politics with people's lives is just really concerning.
Here is Mike Johnson, by the way. He was talking to Laura Ingraham of Fox News about exactly what you were saying. Here he is.
We did read through it long enough, and it did not take long to realize that this is dead on arrival. There's no way we could bring this through the House, but the bill itself would actually be more harmful. And that's why we said it's a non-starter here.
Okay, I just want to clarify this. Mike Johnson, who is the Speaker of the House, that may be true that he's read the bill now. He said the bill was dead on arrival and there'd be no vote before the bill had even been released by the bipartisan group in the Senate.
Yep.
So he couldn't have read the bill before he said the thing was that. You know what's really appalling about this, though? And by the way, I don't know enough to know whether politically it's the best thing to do. I mean, Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer are not draconian types. I think they cared as much about settling this issue and getting money to these freedom fighters in Ukraine that they said we do the best. And Chris Murphy, who's the lead Democrat from Connecticut. But you know what's appalling, and I hope people remember this, while Mitch McConnell gets all this credit from the right for being the guy, and he deserves credit for essentially stacking the Supreme Court with anti-abortion right-wing justices who are going to serve for life, this is the guy who trashed Donald Trump immediately after January 6th, then voted not to convict him. Had he been a person of principle, other Republicans joined him, voted to convict, and we would have none of this discussion about democracy hanging by a thread. Mitch McConnell supported this compromise. He goes into a meeting, the Republicans he represents don't like it, he comes out of the meeting, and like he did with Trump on January 6th, does a 180. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And, this is what I'm saying is I think I'm very nervous about the fact that so many of these important political policy decisions are now being subjected to what is really just partisan politics.
I agree.
And their game playing. And the fact that McConnell is able to switch his position so readily without any political repercussions just shows you that it's just crass political maneuvering. And, I think and I hope that we can do something on the border because I think we really do need on the border. There are a lot of things we could do. And the vast majority of people in America don't think that we should violate people's rights when they're seeking asylum, do believe that there should be due process at the border. And, the ACLU, we're continuing to work on that. We work in Congress, we work in the legislature.
Yeah, but there's a guy who's pretty progressive who once said elections have consequences. That would be Barack Obama. And when you have a Republican majority in the House, which obviously there is, you got to play ball even if you don't want to. We're talking to Carol Rose from the Civil Liberties Union.
So there's been a lot of questions about what's going on in Springfield with the police department up there in terms of their handling narcotics arrest and allegations of brutalizing civilians. Now the DA has been thrown under the microscope, let's put it that way. What's going on?
So this is actually a good news story. You know me, I always bring a bit of optimism to your show, guys. That's
why you're not on more frequently, by the way. Ruins the mood we're trying to create here.
So what happened here is that the people of Springfield, over an 8-year period, were victimized by this really horrible narcotics department, the police department. They were planting evidence, they were falsifying evidence, they were beating up kids. The facts are just really atrocious, beating up young people of color and then spitting on them and saying, welcome to the white man's world, like that kind of level of really gross behavior on the part of the police department. So the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, came in and did an investigation and showed what happened. And they looked at 115,000 pages of documents on, complaints and reports and all sorts of things. And they came out and they said, this is a problem. And the Springfield Police Department had to disband this unit and try to, clean up things.
It was the only consent decree entered in any police department in America under the Trump administration.
Exactly.
That's how bad it was.
That's how bad it was.
Okay.
Right, exactly. This is, not to be taken lightly. And yet, the Hampden County District Attorney's Office, the prosecutors, the state prosecutors who then prosecute people based on the evidence that the police provide, said, well, we don't see any problem here. We're not going to go back and take a look at those 8 years of all the people that we might have wrongfully prosecuted because it's not our job to investigate. And so the ACLU, together with the law firm Boylston and Stores and with Committee for Public Counsel Service, which is the public defenders, the state public defenders, filed a lawsuit in April of 2021 and said, we think that the state of Massachusetts, the Supreme Judicial Court, should tell the DAs, no, you actually do have an obligation to go back and clean up the mess. You do have an obligation to investigate, and if you find something bad, to turn that over to the defense so that we can have due process for everybody. And it was just really an amazing victory. Just even before so far we've only gotten 700 pages out of the 114,000 pages that the DOJ looked at on police misconduct. And just based on those, the DA has already identified 8,000 impacted cases. Like, that's just a huge amount. And, this really harkens back to, remember,
right?
Yeah, so we had the drug lab scandals where you had 2 drug lab chemists who were falsifying records about drug possession and things like that. Annie Ducan and, I forget the Farrak. Sonia Farrak. And in 2 different labs, and the court went in and said, no, you have to go back. And there were 65,000 cases there. And the DEA has an obligation, the state has an obligation to go back. When the state has wrongfully convicted someone, they have an obligation to fix it. And this extends that same principled reasoning to also when there's instances of police misconduct leading to wrongful convictions. So for those who care about due process, our Supreme Judicial Court, Justice Gaziano wrote a beautiful opinion. And it really does give hope that when we fight, we can win.
Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
You have gone after the mifepristone case, that's the medical abortion drug, saying that a lot of this is the ACLU saying, well, what did you say?
Well, mifepristone is the most widely used medicine for abortion care.
It's like half of the abortions.
Yeah,
right?
like half of them. And it's incredibly safe. I always say it's safer than Viagra. So what's happened is that there's a Trump-appointed judge down in Texas, and some people went and filed a lawsuit down there and said, we don't think that the FDA approval of this drug should have been allowed. Okay, and that was even 20 years ago, and then an update to the approval 2017. And so the higher court, the appeals court, the lower court judge said, it's not approved. I'm overriding the FDA 20 years later. Can you imagine every drug on the market if a single judge could try to do a nation overrule on a drug. It's crazy.
But there were no health problems during those 2 decades.
Health problems.
Yeah.
No, it's really safe. And so then the appeals court said, no, we can go back to 2017. We just can't go back all the way to 2000. And so the 2017 rules would just make it harder to get, a lot harder. Like you'd have to go to a doctor's office and do all sorts of things, and you couldn't put it through the mail. Now the U.S. Supreme Court is taking that up, and we don't know how the court is going to rule, but they're going to be hearing the case in late March. So we're all paying a lot of attention to find out what that means, because if it makes it harder to seek abortion care, we all know that women won't stop getting abortions. They'll just find dangerous ways to do it. And we'll go back to the bad old days pre-Roe, where people were getting back alley abortions. And
was Dobbs 6-3, by the way? Was it 5-4 or 6-3? It was 6-3, wasn't it?
I think so.
Dobbs, okay.
You know, people always say that if this would put other drugs' legitimacy in question, and they would be. But what other drugs are? I was trying to think. What other drug is so politically embroiled as an abortion
Well,
drug?
they're never going to go after Viagra, right?
No, they're not going to go after. They're not going to go after that.
saying.
But I did wonder if that's really a legit argument, because I don't see. I mean, maybe there's another drug I can't think of.
Well, I think there could be. If you think about a really, thinking about how when Trump was the president, he went after companies that he didn't like for various political reasons. I remember he was so mad at Amazon because they owned the Washington Post. So there was that kind of efforts to go after that. So you don't want to give courts that may become politicized the ability, the power to go after specific businesses or drug makers. You could imagine it happening with the vaccine. Like if they say, oh, we're anti-vaxxers, so we're going to say you can't do the vaccines anymore. They're not going to be FDA approved. We don't want to politicize the FDA.
But the vaccine,
experts at the FDA should be able to make their determinations without any interference from the courts or from politics.
Okay, so without giving us a legal in layperson's language, I am of the opinion, which I'm sorry, I'm having microphone problems.
Me too.
I am of the opinion that there is not one chance in hell that the Supreme Court is going to rule against mifepristone. And the reason is not because they're not anti-reproductive freedom, because they are, but because my opinion, even though I'm generally wrong, is yet another major blow at abortion 4 months before the election would probably mean that their candidate of choice, Donald Trump, would lose the election. I don't think there's anything that could be more powerful for Biden than a ruling against mifepristone. I said that in light of the fact that the majority is hell-bent on taking away a woman's right to choose in any way they can. How do they, if they decide after Dobbs, which overruled Roe v. Wade, if they decide not to do it a second time for political reasons, obviously they won't say that, what do they say? How do they say that mifepristone is okay, but the privacy rights from Roe v. Wade were phony?
Oh, Jim, you're so fun. Thinking that they're consistent. No. They're ideological. Let me say, I think if they do rule that mifepristone is either illegal or that there are such severe restrictions on it, one of the most important things that we, the good people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do is to get our legislature to pass the Location Shield Act, which would say that outside bounty hunters from places like Texas or Florida or wherever cannot track us with our phones. They can't track our phones.
Do you think they are going to rule that it's that it can't be?
I think there's a good chance they'll be so ideological they'll either rule that it's banned or just that the restrictions from 2017
or that they can't mail it.
You can't mail it. You have to go to a doctor's office for 10 days or whatever and wait. And, I mean, there's all sorts of restrictions, right? So I think that's a likely outcome. But I do think that there are things that we can and must do because we're a beacon of liberty and we can do things here in Massachusetts. Well, we need to be, Jim, and you're going to help.
I am.
No, I mean it.
You saw what impact we've had on the audience. It's huge. It was like a tidal wave.
But I really do think if we pass common sense laws like this, I mean, you don't want to be have your cell phone tracked by data brokers, do you? I don't. And I think if we pass that bill in the state legislature, which is going to be coming up to the state legislature for a vote, and you should all tell your state reps and senators to vote for it. It's the Location Shield Act, and it would mean that bounty hunters and other people can't track you if you're seeking medical care, or for that matter, going to your therapist or going wherever you want to go. And so I think there are things that we can and should do here in Massachusetts to try to keep abortion safe.
Okay, you have 15 seconds to give another one of those upbeat democracy, it's us, or whatever you said. Can you, 15 seconds. Go ahead, say it so we uplift everybody.
Okay, I'm going to end with an uplift story, which is we have a new voter education plan at the ACLU of Massachusetts that you can all become involved with, and we did BIPOC to the ballot. And
we talked about that,
Trying to figure out why people don't vote, and one of the big things we found
Pump it up a little more than you're doing.
Well, we're going around to key communities, and we're trying to find out why people are not voting when they should and they can, because democracy is a muscle,
Democracy is a muscle.
And if you exercise
you don't use
it
gets
atrophies.
Strong.
Okay. Well, to say your vote matters. For the first time in the city of Brockton, a woman from the Dominican Republic got elected to the school board by 3 votes.
Oh, well, that's pretty great.
So if you think your vote doesn't matter, it matters.
I would be interested to know, not a time in a future date, why people said they don't vote. That would be...
They said they were afraid their vote wouldn't matter.
Oh, that
was the reason. And so that's why this is so important to realize your vote does matter.
Well, you don't vote because it's rigged, obviously. Why would you vote if it's rigged and it's a witch hunt?
Okay.
On that note, you really have lifted everybody's something or other.
3 votes.
Thank you. That is a great story. I didn't know that's a great story.
We've been speaking with Carol Rose. She's Executive Director of the Massachusetts branch of the ACLU. After a quick break, our media maven, Sue O'Connell, NBC 10 Boston, is with us. She's going to tell us about King Charles. He's having health problems, and also Jay-Z is taking on the Grammys the other night. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy were live at the library. We're sorry. We know we're having some sound problems. Our apologies. Bear with us. Our very talented colleagues are working to fix it. We're streaming at YouTube.com/GBH News. As I say that, of course, no one can hear us. So this Friday, we have some leaders of the National Symphony of Ukraine, who will be joining us for Live Music Friday and playing. We're thrilled about that. And the mayor, as in Michelle Wu, joins us next Tuesday at the library. Joined now by media maven Sue O'Connell, local woman too, you may know. She's a co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, co-host of NBC 10 Boston's At Issue every Sunday at 11:30. That would follow Meet the Press. Hello, Sue O'Connell.
Good day, good day.
Good day.
Good day.
Good day. That's good.
So, Sue O'Connell, Jim can never understand why people are concerned about what's going on with the royal family.
I would just like to say, though, we talked about what we were going to talk about today. It said that Marjorie and Sue were going to discuss.
I haven't said a word.
So
I don't
that's
intend to say a
stay
word.
out of it.
Well, it was leading the newscast last night in a lot of the different stations. King Charles III, we used to know him as Prince Charles, he's got cancer, which is not fun. We don't know what kind of cancer he has. But people are really concerned about this and they themselves over Kate Middleton with her undiagnosed abdominal surgery. She's obviously a young and healthy-looking mother of some young kids. But people are transfixed.
Yeah, I think there's two things, obviously, when everybody that's in the public eye has an illness, people when they're missing, of course, you want to know what's going on, and people care about them, like Marjorie and I care about these people we never met. The other part is it does show a shift in transparency. Although we don't know what cancer the king has, it isn't hard to believe that not long ago wouldn't tell us anything at all.
Yeah.
So there is a shift in transparency here. They're humans just like the rest of us, so that's how it goes.
They are?
Yes, apparently.
I would think, though, until his 70s, I was saying this poor guy had been waiting until his 70s to become the king. His mother died at 96. He's only been, a year and a half as the king. You want him to have a little bit more time, the poor guy. We hope he more time.
You know, Tina Brown has written some great stuff about the royals.
Oh, God, she's a riot.
One of the things she has written is that we view them the wrong way, that they are the ones that are being held captive, right? It's like they're the ones that are like stuck in this family that they can't leave and jobs that they have to keep. So, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for them, and I hope.
And Harry and Meghan may have to come back from California to deal with this crisis.
Gone there.
Harry's already there.
I know that already.
Even Jim knows
So
that.
here's my question. I'm not allowed to participate in this discussion, but I just have one question. As you know, my favorite anchor, his work more than anybody else's.
Anderson Cooper.
He led the news last night.
He did.
And I would say there's some stories in this country we're at great risk here. Of fronts. He led not with King Charles's cancer, but with 12 minutes of King Charles's cancer. And Harry is flying over to be part of the something cabinet where if he's incapacitated, he is part of the group that rules. Is that good news judgment on the part of CNN, would you say?
Jim, we need the ratings, okay? We need the ratings.
People are interested in it.
I know
canceled
democracy.
the morning show, actually.
Yep, democracy is on the verge of collapse. Things are happening. You know, Congress is making things worse, but we have to pay attention to a very small country that we used to have a relation with around their celebrity figureheads who don't do anything.
And one last thing,
the ratings.
The royal historians, like the woman who was on TV last night on CNN, who I really like.
I love it for the royal historians.
What does she do in between being called upon? What do you do if you're the royal historian? So the guy is sworn in. He has the coronation, which I got up to watch, and then.
And all the weddings we've watched.
A wedding, that's true. And it is very sad, and I do feel bad that he's got cancer, but I feel bad when anybody's got cancer. Not anybody, but 90% of people have cancer.
Not anybody.
For being honest.
So what do royal historians do in between royal happenings?
They collect data. They go around, they talk to people, they work their sources.
Exactly.
You know, it's a lot, Jim.
Exactly.
Marjorie and I, when we get our podcast on the Royals, you're going to be tuning in.
That's right. I love the Royals. And there are all of these great British accents. Everybody's all, worked up about it. They have about 12 tabloids over there which follow every single move all the royals make. It's kind of a distraction because it really doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. You want everybody to be happy with the royals. You certainly don't want anybody to be sick. No. But it's a distraction, Jim. People need distractions because a lot of the rest of the news is very depressing. So that's why Sue and I... Ooh, no one can hear me. Millions of Americans want to hear all about what's going on with Prince Charles. Yes.
You might know this. Is it possible that one of the royal historians who's not busy at the moment could help fix the sound on our radio show?
I don't know.
Or
We're working on it.
Okay, not.
Yeah, we are aware there's a problem, and we'll try to repeat what we say that if it goes off the air and we're seeing it.
Sue O'Connell is with us. Do you know that?
Sue O'Connell is with us.
She's a local woman.
So the Biden administration is going direct hits at former President Trump. Well, that has begun to change. We're going to play you a little clip from a campaign event in Nevada on Sunday. Here's Joe Biden.
Now, imagine the nightmare of Donald Trump being elected. No. This is the guy who, when he was in France, and they asked him to go to an American cemetery in France in World War II where Americans were buried. You know what he said? He said those folks buried in the cemetery were suckers and losers. Suckers and losers, the guy said.
Yeah, he went after him in many ways, talking about how he describes the January 6th rioters as hostages, saying that his former top military man deserved execution. That was Milley, I think, was the one who said that about that, and how Trump has said he'd be a dictator, but only on day one, and et cetera, et cetera. For him to be going after the former president?
Yeah, I think it's the only political strategy, actually, other than being fact-based about what's happening in the economy and expecting that the economy is going to continue to get better and people will start feeling it. But listen, there's one thing that I think polls are showing us, talk to audiences, that they don't want to hear about Trump. Trump is something that's disturbing. But now we're basically in a one-on-one race. I mean, I don't want to call it for Nikki Haley yet, but the general election campaign has begun. And we have to, in the media, and highlight the things that Trump has done and said, and make it clear. And Joe Biden has two things he has to do. One is he has to attack Trump and remind people of what Trump did, remind people of what Trump is saying right now and what Trump is saying he will do. He has to remind people of the rollback of Roe v. Wade, the actual rights that people lost under Trump, and has to really build on the economy, which is a fact-based, data-driven thing that we're not feeling right now because of the inflation, but eventually we will.
How come you're professional enough that when the sound goes off, you know to pause and not talk, and we don't know to pause and not talk?
I've been on radio, Jim, since I was 14.
That's true, by the way, isn't it?
Yes, so, all kinds of terrible things happen in radio, so you got to keep flying.
Okay, I'm going to try to be as professional as you are, if I can. I know I'm a broken record. Marjorie hates when I repeat myself nonstop, but I can't help it.
Oh, here he goes again.
Why is Joe Biden, I'm not going to talk about Theo, why is Joe Biden not accepting the offer, I think it's CBS, whoever broadcasts the Super Bowl, to do what almost every president has done and get 15 minutes of softball questions, which 120 million Americans will see? Why
do you want my answer as if the political consultant or as a citizen?
Both.
All right, as a citizen, it's outrageous. He should be as accessible as Donald Trump is accessible. Biden and Obama both have never been great when it's come to being out there and being available for questions.
Far worse.
Biden is worse. It's really unconscionable. If I were Biden's campaign director, though, I would say just hold the ball, take the knee, don't go out there, don't expose yourself. Because Biden, of course, is a gaffe machine. He always has been. You want to control Biden and control the access. Yes, it would be a softball, but you just never know what Biden's going to say. So I think Biden needs to be just completely held as close as possible, tightly scripted. And also, I think we need, if I were his campaign manager, I'd want to see more data about what the polling is showing.
So you'd never do an interview if you were Joe Biden?
If I were Joe Biden, I would never do. I wouldn't debate.
That is frightening.
I would not do it at all.
Okay, can we move to it's not a happier topic because he was critical. Let's talk about the Grammys for a couple of minutes. Here's a clip of Jay-Z's acceptance speech for the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award at the Grammys, where he calls out the fact that a person he is married to, who I think has won like 30-some Grammys, has never won an award for Album of the Year. He's Jay-Z.
But she has more famous than everyone and never won Album of the Year. So even by your own metrics, that doesn't work. Think about it. Most Grammys never won Album of the Year. That doesn't work. Some of you gonna go home tonight and feel like you've been robbed. Some of you made it robbed.
That's a pretty good line. Two good lines there.
Yeah, and
actually.
as he said, when I get nervous, I tell the truth. So listen, the Grammys are, all of these awards, whether they're the Emmys, the Grammys, the Oscars, they're not necessarily, they're subjective, they're also political. I don't think a black woman has won Album of the Year since Lauryn Hill. And
is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously sexism, and there's obviously, although this year more women were nominated, but there's also racism, and he's absolutely right. But also the most popular, I mean, The Weeknd didn't get nominated when he had one of the biggest selling albums of the year a few years ago. So it's a mishmash. I want to just salute Jay-Z, though, because what often happens when you are critical of an organization and then you get an award, usually you're very, humble and thankful, and you don't speak truth to power.
You're in the tank for them.
Right. So
That's right,
I just want to salute Jay-Z for saying on stage what he has said all along, and also for accepting the award, because oftentimes when you're critical of a group and they offer you an award, you might say, no, I don't want to take it. But he spoke truth to power. And listen, what a great night with Tracy Chapman.
Oh, my God, one of the greatest.
There was a time where you could not swing a dead cat in Cambridge or Boston and not hit Tracy Chapman because she was on every corner, busking.
Did you actually see her?
I saw her. I saw her like 5 times in a week.
Oh my God!
A great moment to show. There's lots of controversy around that song and that cover and all of that, but you had this beautiful expression of music and celebration between the two of them.
One of the greats.
And also, one thing I learned really early in the music business is that we categorize things. It's country, it's R&B, it's soul, it's this. But when you're with the actual musicians, they just love music. They just love music, and that was just a great example of that.
You mentioned seeing Tracy Chapman. So, did people realize what kind of talent she had? Would there be crowds around her, or was she just kind of working it out song by song like everybody else?
She had a very distinctive sound.
Yep.
And I was trying to explain this to some of the younger people at work the other day. I mean, remember Harvard Square would just be filled all the time with people, so you always knew you were getting something good. But there was something about her. That's only because we know she went on to be so famous and successful.
Can I hate to talk about inside baseball on the air. Our understanding is this problem we're having with audio is getting worse, and it is a library feed issue. So I say this with great regret to those who were kind enough to come to the library. What we, I believe, have been instructed to do, Jamie, tell me if I'm wrong, is terminate this interview. A few weeks ago with Christina Quinn. You didn't hear what I just said for that reason.
Terminate the interview.
Play an interview we did with Christina Quinn, and then Marjorie and I are hopping in our cars, rushing back to Brighton to finish the show. And also our apologies to our 2 next guests, Stacy Thompson and Jim Aloisi, who are kind enough to actually be here. So our apologies to all of you who came. This almost never happens. Our apologies to the 2 of you who were so nice to be here. And most importantly, our apologies to the great O'Connell.
Terminated before I finished.
So coming up, Christina Quinn, we talked to a former colleague of ours, has a new fabulous podcast at the Washington Post. It is called Try This. So try this, listen to this. We'll rush back to Brighton and we'll talk to you soon. Don't change that dial.
Okay, we are back in Brighton. We had a minor snafu down at the Boston Public Library. Jim Browdy's driven like an old lady for 25 years. Suddenly he's got a Tesla, and he's going 75 on the Mass Pike.
First of all, whatever
stunned.
was going, I did beat you here.
Yes, you did.
Which is really upsetting to you, isn't it?
It's very upsetting to me, indeed.
I did.
But back to business here. After a quick break, we're going to talk to Jim Aloisi and Stacy Thompson for a monthly transit panel. Talk about free fares or not for the T and buses. And are you better off with an EV like Jim has, or a plug-in hybrid? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, safe back in Brighton, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are not live at the Boston Public Library. Again, apologies to all the people who came down there today. We're live back in Brighton because I did drive more quickly than a grandmother, as Marjorie has described me for decades. We're streaming at youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News. On Friday, we will be back at the library. Everything will be fixed. We'll have some lead players from the National Symphony of Ukraine for Live Music Friday. We're really looking forward to that. Next Tuesday, we'll be back at the library with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu.
We're not streaming here in the Brighton studios either.
Oh, we're not?
No, we're not.
Okay, so we're not at the library. We're not streaming.
But we're persevering.
And we have absolutely no water to make coffee.
We're keeping calm, and we're carrying on.
By the way, and let me just say this, if I may. I am not the kind of person who would say to one of our colleagues, feel free to get water to fill up the Keurig machine so we can make coffee so we could drink it during the show, because that's not the kind of person I am, even though we're out of water.
Somebody just said
currently
that they were on it, Your Royalness. Jim.
Thank you.
So,
here is for our monthly transit panel. I think, I know Stacy Thompson is with us. She was in person, now she's on Zoom.
You know why Jim's not here?
Where is he?
He took the tea.
No, is that John? Is that really true?
I think that may be.
Actually, he's about to be here in about 10 seconds. Jim is he is there. Jim is a former transportation secretary. You know, that's a weird wording I always use. He was the former secretary of transportation for Massachusetts, member of the Transit Matter Board, and a contributor to a fabulous publication, Commonwealth Beacon. Stacy is the executive director of the Great Livable Streets Alliance. Hello, and thank you for your incredible flexibility, you two. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. And did you take the tea? Is that why it took you longer, Jim Aloisi, to get back to you?
So interesting So I took the bus over to the library, which was a very sort of pleasant, simple experience. I took the green to red back. It was okay. I was lucky because I literally caught a Green Line train as I was entering Copley, and then literally caught a Braintree train when I was going into the Red Line. So the only issue really was the interminable slow zone between South Station and Broadway. But,
okay. So
by the way, I did the same thing. I drove my Tesla at 90 miles an hour on the turnpike, and here we are. How did you get where you are, Stacy?
Well, I took the tea, and this is not the audience to tell that you've been speeding in your Tesla.
I was only kidding. I wasn't really speeding.
He was speeding in his Tesla. We call it his Tesla around here.
Well, thank you again,
let's get back to the your expertise here. We've talked to you a lot about free fares or low income fares on buses, on the MBTA. There seems to be kind of a little fisticuffs is not the right word, kerfuffle, whatever you want to call it, between Michelle Wu and Governor Healy about what is appropriate. So what do you think's going on, Stacy?
Yeah, well, I was actually just in Washington, D.C. yesterday talking to some folks about fare free transit because it is happening everywhere, right? It's not just Boston. It's happening in Virginia. It's happening in Missouri. It's happening all over the country. And it was a little bizarre to me to see Commonwealth sort of hit fare-free transit against low-income fares because Michelle Wu, the mayor, has been very clear from day one that she supports fare-free transit and low-income fares. Her administration is not naive about the need to have both if we're going to be collecting fares anywhere on the system. I think where it's getting challenging is that what advocates like myself and the Wu administration have been asking is for the T to sort of authentically explore both options at the same time. And the T is really prioritizing low-income fares right now, which is good. It's very long overdue. But, the Wu administration put a lot of money and resources into a pilot that has been very successful. And I think the expectation would be that on the heels of a successful pilot, we would see more, more collaboration from the MBTA, potentially expanding on this fare-free pilot, doing more work to explore fare-free buses, especially as they are working to implement a long overdue, over budget, $1 billion fare collection project.
When does the pilot expire, Stacey? I'm sorry, March 31st or something? When is it?
Yes, it expires in March.
You know what I found particularly weird about this? I don't know if you want to call it standoff. The state's saying low-income fare, Wu still advocating for free fares to be in the mix. We had Phil Lang with us, as you both know, for an hour in December, and we asked him whether the free bus pilot program would continue after the March expiration date. And here's what the GM of the T, Philip Ang, had to say. Well, I don't know if that was an evasive answer, but it seemed that he was saying it will continue, but that's not what the state and the T are saying. Is it, Jim Aloisi?
Well, no. It's an interesting choice of words. I believe that is the intention.
Exactly.
As a former English major, I would say, parse out the sentence, the intention of whom.
Yeah.
So if there was a straw person about, and it was in high relief in Jim Pizer's piece in Commonwealth Beacon. And the straw person is this discussion of either an all or nothing. It's either we charge everyone fares, whether means tested or not, or it's all free. There are those, I would consider myself one of them, who would say, can you just stop a minute? How about if we make every unlinked bus trip free?
What's unlinked mean?
So an unlinked bus means you're just using the bus and you're not transferring to the subway.
Oh, okay.
Right? If you made every unlinked bus, which I believe is what we're doing now on the 3 routes, okay? That's exactly what's happening in real time. If you did that, you would improve, I think, bus service for everyone considerably. You would, so this is about much more than equity. It's about quality of bus service. You'd be improving it terrifically. You'd be saving the T money, I believe, over time because they wouldn't have to cost out bus for the very expensive new fare collection. You'd be doing something good for equity. You can make this politically a statewide initiative and make every bus from every regional transit authority free. Many of them are free, and it's a big success story, particularly up in Merrimack Valley and in Worcester. Why we aren't having that conversation about free unlinked bus and then means test everything else, lower everyone else's fares if they qualify for SNAP or some other program, right? This is not really that complicated. And it boggles my mind that we can't figure out how to get the right people to have that conversation and not this other conversation about free everything, which is a very different and difficult conversation to have. And I don't think a necessary conversation to have. If we could have free unlinked bus, we'd be striking a blow for not just equity, but operational efficiencies that would be a model for the rest of the country.
Stacy, you just mentioned that down in Washington, you talked to other people who were advocating or maybe already had begun free transportation in their city. So if these other places can do it, why can't we?
Yeah, I mean, some of the other places are facing similar challenges where, right now we're using ARPA or the money the federal government gave during COVID to fund some of these fare free transit policies. That's what the city of Boston is doing. But places like Kansas City, am I right? Yeah, Kansas City started doing fare free, in a red state, started doing fare free transit before us. Alexandria in Virginia, close to Washington, D.C., has made their system free and are seeing similar results in terms of increased ridership, decreases in operator assault. The number one reason bus operators get into arguments and frankly get assaulted is around fare collection.
Really?
So all of these great benefits we're seeing in pockets all around the country. I think what is, sort of not being said here is that it seems like the T is okay for communities like Boston to keep paying for it, but that they're less interested in doing the work of leading a more system-wide pilot, which is what, Jim and I are advocating for, to sort of see, Boston is able to do this because they have bus routes that start and end within the city of Boston. But when other communities, like let's say Cambridge or Brookline, if they wanted to do something like this, they would have to collaborate. It would be more complicated. And so it's really up to the T to expand upon this
So
pilot.
what's going to happen, Jim? What's the outcome? Despite what you think it should be, you too. What's the outcome?
I actually think that there could be an outcome that has a statewide bus initiative that includes unlinked bus trips for this MBTA system. I think that is a politically sensible, achievable approach to dealing with this on a statewide basis, so you get the buy-in from legislators across the Commonwealth. And you limit it, but you limit it in a way that's highly effective from an operational perspective and an equity perspective. So I think that's the basis for a conversation that I hope will unfold over the next coming.
Who's going to be the champion of that outcome?
Well, I'm hoping that the mayor, there's no indication that the mayor is anything but a leader when it comes to these kinds of conversations. If she could pull together a municipal or a regional coalition, have people from the Merrimack Valley, Worcester, and other areas that are enjoying their benefit of this, I think it's something that would be pretty powerful. And again, nothing that's going to, frankly, break the bank. It's just the cost of free unlinked bus, I think, for the T, if you exclude the ride, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe $30 million a year.
Yeah, it's just for context. Fares cover about 19% of the T's budget. Unlinked bus trips are 5% of that 19%.
Sure.
So it's 35 million tops. The whole state you could do for 60 million.
How much money does the T lose? I mean, you talked about this new fare collection system, which I think you said was quite expensive. If we didn't have to do the new fare collection system and we just did free rides or whatever, would that be, how much money would the T lose?
I think free transit across the board, my own opinion is it's not viable.
Okay.
That's way too much money. It may be viable at some future point. I'm not saying never, but right now we need to begin a process, right? And the only way you begin a process, in my judgment, you don't ask for everything. You begin in a very sensible way, and politically you build a statewide coalition, which is why if you include RTAs in this, which we're already doing in many respects, it becomes a more powerful and achievable goal.
Do you agree with that, Stacy?
I do, and there is actually a bill in the State House sponsored by Rep. Barber and Senator Jalen that would call for and fund a year-long pilot for fare-free buses across the entire state. So there are champions. This is, a live conversation, or trying to make it a live conversation at the State House.
So we figured what would flow from this is having a discussion about funding in the T, which we do with you all the time. But we're going to put that on the back burner for a few minutes because of a screed written by Jim Aloisi about EVs in Commonwealth Beacon that grossly offended me as an owner of an EV.
Yeah.
So you make
Jim had to cut short his charging time, which he usually does.
I did. It was very depressing.
He charges at the Lenox Hotel every time we park the cars there.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So in all seriousness, Jim, you make a case. Well, tell us what the case you make is that essentially that EVs are not the be-all, end-all. We should consider plug-ins. Give us your thing in 60 seconds, then we can debate it.
I think, so I've been saying this for a while, that the transition from an all internal combustion to an all full electric vehicular system is going to take longer, be more uneven and unequal than people want to admit. And I think what we see happening now is there was an initial spurt of growth with early adopters like you, Jim, who
I wasn't that early, but okay, good.
Reasonably early adopter. And then it slows down. And it slows down because people still have anxiety, maybe not so much about range. Range anxiety is maybe lessened because the batteries get you farther, but now it's charging anxiety. Yeah. Where do I charge? I live in a fairly large condominium building in downtown Boston. The building has no policy about, many of the people who live here should be early EV adopters, but the building is not able or equipped to handle the load. So, I grew up in East Boston, triple deckers, you're not going to be putting, charge cords from the second floor down to the street. There are a lot of charging issues that need to be resolved. I think that the transition to electric, which is necessary and inevitable, we need to start thinking more about getting people into plug-in hybrids as an interim solution that gives people the comfort of range and that also have significant emissions benefits. And we need to start thinking less about electric as the primary solution to greenhouse gas emissions and particulates. And we need to start thinking more about transit. EVs do nothing to reduce particulate matter emissions. They might worsen it. And, we just got to have a reality check. And I think what we've seen nationally is that reality check is beginning to happen in real time.
Before Stacy weighs in here, you're not concerned in the plug-in. I may get the terminology wrong, but when you have a gas and an electric drivetrain, it's a less efficient vehicle, right? I mean...
Yeah, it's a vehicle that's going to... they're proven to be on the road. Is it optimal? It's not optimal. Is it the right choice for many people who want to begin to transition to using less? Right. I think that the average mileage that most people use, they could probably use a PHEV on all electric most of the time. And that's really what and they're not going to have the anxiety of range on the one-off that every 2 months they take a long trip.
How about it, Stacy?
Yeah, I think that the transition to electric vehicles looks a lot like the conundrum we have around funding the T, where everyone wants there to be a silver bullet, a single solution. And for too long, we have talked about full electrification of single occupancy vehicles as that silver bullet without sort of providing a suite of options for people who drive cars that can help them reduce their emissions. So hybrid cars are a great option. There are a lot that you can buy in the secondary market that are affordable for people right now. How are we incentivizing people to use those? And also the size of vehicles. Buying a smaller car has a much smaller environmental impact than, even if it runs on diesel, than a really large vehicle that is fully electric, right? The weight, the size. So I would like to see us shift toward a conversation around what are the 5 or 6 different options and meet people where they're at on our pathway to a fully electrified future. Otherwise, we're just not going to get there.
And when you mentioned inequities a minute ago, Jim Aloisi, I assume that was both purchase cost and charging access, as you said a minute ago. For example, in Cambridge, I got all excited when I got an email about 3 months ago saying you could do one of these sidewalk plugs from your wall in your basement, and you just buy a little ramp for a few $100s that goes over the cord, and you can charge your car. This is the slowest charge, like the 2 mile an hour thing, but if you have to top it off. I read either in the Globe or in a local Cambridge paper the other day, it's been out a few months, 2 people have applied for this. So the reality is, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm asking, the charging capacity is far greater and ease of charging for people who own their own homes and who have more money. That's your point, right?
Yeah, there are so many inequities built into this right now. But there's a large cohort of people who can't afford to own a car, right? The cost of a car is second only to their cost of housing.
That's a good point.
So there's that cohort of people. There's a cohort of people who might be able to afford one and wouldn't be able to charge it. And again, I go back to think about a community like East Boston and the triple deckers where virtually no one has off-street parking or access to it. What are we asking people to do? And so I do think that we need to think if the point of electric is to reduce tailpipe carbon emissions, which it does, That's great, but we need to rethink the emphasis we're putting on that in terms of our climate change goals, and I think put more emphasis on mode shifting people to public transportation, give people incentives to buy hybrid plug-ins, and to do the kinds of things that will guide us through what I think is going to be a longer transition period.
We're talking to Stacy Thompson and Jim Aloisi for our monthly transit panel. You know, I'm lost in the confusion driving back here from the library. I can't find the story, but somewhere I read this morning that if some European town is banning SUVs or charging them a lot to park and all that kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about, Stacy?
It's Paris, right?
It's
not some town. It's a major city. This comes back to the vehicle size question, where what we're seeing increasingly in other parts of the world is a recognition that it's not just how you power a vehicle, but the actual physical size of a vehicle has a huge impact on our streets, on the environment, and we're starting to see pricing around that. So I think it's very interesting. I know Jim Aloisi loves this, but I want to see how it goes.
Yeah, I don't think I can't see that happening here. You have a lot of people, oftentimes little teeny tiny women in these great big huge Suburbans, and you think,
well, you have a huge man and a little teeny tiny Tesla, by the way.
That's right. Have you got 15 people you're driving around? I'm not really clear why they need to have such huge cars.
Right. When you say you can't see it happening here, though, Marjorie, I wonder what is it that separates us as Americans from people who live in Paris, France? I mean, other than an uncommon language, a language barrier, and they probably eat better.
Don't you remember what Marjorie Clapperud said about this?
What was it?
No, I don't.
Oh, male. It's a male thing?
Big car.
Big whatever.
Small whatever. That was her line.
But you want a serious answer, Jim, to your question? There is no collective sense of anything in this country. We don't believe we have any obligation to collaborate with anybody to do anything. But go ahead, Stacey. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's actually we have financial incentives at the federal level for SUV-sized vehicles in the United States to protect the American auto industry. That is why we have larger vehicles here. So to me, this is a question of tariffs. To me, this is a question of regulations at the federal level. That's why we have larger cars in this country. We incentivize them. So I don't think that it is entirely out of the question, especially as costs continue to increase and people are looking for ways to decrease the price of owning a vehicle. I think we're going to see a desire for smaller vehicles. And if they can't buy smaller American vehicles, we're going to have a problem. So I see this coming maybe in 5 or 10 years.
Because I want to get to the funding thing, if we can next time promise to discuss why there's, at least in my opinion, such a lack of urgency about building creativity, fixing broken chargers. I just don't get it because it's really discouraging. So we'll get to that next month. I do want to talk about funding. A lot of people thought there was a really optimistic moment in the State of the Commonwealth given by Governor Healy in January when she talked, I thought, about drastically increasing funding for the T. Here's part of what she said. Stacey, it seems just like your buddy Jim Aloisi was saying that Phil Lang chose his words very carefully. It seems the mayor chose them very carefully, too. So 2 quick things. 1, what did she mean? And 2, this commission that Healy has set up to look to funding for the future, how much hope do the transit experts like you hold in it? But go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, so Streets Blog Massachusetts did a great breakdown of what the budget actually looks like. And if you look at everything, including capital and operating expenses, we're actually putting less money toward the T. What the governor did do this year is make sure that the operating budget is fully funded, which we haven't necessarily had the previous years, and she used fair share money to achieve that. So we know we're funded for the next year. There is not extra money to build new things. There is basically enough money to fix the things that we know need to be fixed this year. But I think if you don't really understand the nuance of the MPT's budget, it may not be quite apparent that this isn't, she didn't add hundreds of millions of dollars of new money in net. It was just making that operating budget whole, which is good. Other departments, I just want to name, when you look at the whole budget, there was a prioritization for transit. Other budgets across the state right now are cutting, right? They're seeing overall decreases. So And, I'm sure Jim Aloisi has thoughts on this commission. I think it's positive that we're going to start to have a conversation. I was just chatting with Jim about how in Minnesota, they didn't have a commission. They already passed their transportation finance bill, and they just won $1 billion from the federal government for a bridge project.
Wow.
So, I hope that in a year's time, we're not just sitting on our hands looking at a report, but that we've actually done something, because other states are eating our lunch right now in terms of doing the work we should.
So, Jim Aloisi, you have a minute. What's your take on this commission and its prospects?
Time will tell. We've got two different things going on in parallel. One is a systemic shortfall in the T's operating budget. What the governor's done is she's filled that hole for 1 year, I think, as a way to buy time for this commission to begin to get up and running. But there's a chronic, persistent shortfall because ridership is down. And ridership's not coming back anytime soon to where it was before 2020. This group needs to deal with that shortfall in a sustained way. It's not just filling the hole and walking away from it. First thing you need to do is plant a tree in that hole and then fill it. What do I mean by that? We need to think about what is the public transportation system we want in Metro Boston in 2040 and work back from that. What is the capacity of the T on an operating basis and a capital basis that gets us there? That's the number that needs to be satisfied by the governor, this commission, the legislature. They also need to look at what happens as we continue to move to plug-ins and EVs. Gas tax revenues are diminishing. They're still way down from where they were before the pandemic. They're not sustainable, and we need to find new revenue sources to fill that looming gap. And so there are two different things going on. They need to intersect, and we need to think very differently, I believe, and going forward about how we fund our transportation system. Probably talking about road user charging of some type.
Hear, hear.
And, we'll see what this commission has to say. There's not much that's new that they're going to have to experiment with. This is more about policy than technology.
We are out of time, but thank you so much to our team on our monthly transit panelists, Jim Aloisi and Stacy Thompson. Thanks a lot, and thanks for filling in.
Our transit paces today.
Yeah, that's right.
Hannah, by the way, biked back from the library and got here only a few minutes after us.
That's right.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah,
it's true.
Jim Aloisi is former Transportation Secretary and member of the Transit Matters Board and contributor to Commonwealth Beacon. Stacy is Executive Director of the Livable Streets Alliance. Thanks again for joining us. After a quick break, we're going to talk to CNN's John King, who's also been kind enough to rearrange his schedule. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We obviously are not live at the Boston Public Library anymore. We had some technical travails, and kind enough to adjust his schedule to accommodate us, and you wouldn't expect anything less from the great John King. He is CNN's chief national correspondent, been involved in 2 fabulous reporting projects this election cycle, all over the map and the battleground. Thanks for your flexibility, John. It's good to see you.
26 years in cable television. Technology occasionally happens.
That's right.
Happy to be here. I understand you. Every now and then you got to cue it up.
Well, thank you very much, John King. So give us the latest on this immigration bill. What's happening? Mitch McConnell seems to have changed his mind. I'm not sure. Where are we?
The Republicans said it was absolutely urgent to negotiate this package. They did. It was very hard to do it. And now that they have a package, they're going to kill it. So that's your government at work. And they're going to kill it because Donald Trump is against it. McConnell's in a box. So, if he brings it to the floor, his guys are going to vote against it. So what they're going to say is, if Schumer, the Democratic majority leader, brings it to the floor to try to advance the bill, you need 60 votes for that. The Republicans won't vote for it. They need 10 Republicans. So they'll say no. And what the Republicans are going to say is that our guys and women need more time to look at this. But it's pretty clear. It's abundantly clear that they just don't want to do it now, even though they authorize, the negotiations were authorized by the leadership. Now you have people going after not only criticizing the proposal, and a lot of what they're saying about the proposal is not factually accurate, actually. But they're also, now you hear again, some Republicans saying, okay, McConnell shouldn't have allowed this to happen to begin with. We should get rid of him too. And who says that? So this is Donald Trump talking. You're going to see Republican senators moving their lips, but essentially close your eyes. What you're hearing is what Donald Trump wants them to do.
By the way, CNN, which John has some familiarity with, is now just reporting live that a jury has found the Michigan school shooter's mother guilty of manslaughter, which is, I think, precedent-setting, to say the least. The McConnell thing that I know this is so naive, John, when it comes to politics. This is the same guy who said something, I can't remember the exact words, the mob was fed lies, I think was his line, shortly after January 6th. All of this provoked by the president. And then, of course, he votes to acquit him when he could have helped end this whole, in our opinion, nightmare. And then he is this champion of this immigration fix, apparently has the courage to stand up for a minute to some of his fellow Republicans, goes to a meeting and does a total 180. You've been dealing with these people for your whole career. Are they embarrassed at moments like this when they literally do a total flip based upon political exigencies or whatever?
McConnell's problem, not to defend him, his problem is he's the leader of Senate Republicans, and they are telling him, don't do this. His number 2 and his number 3. His number 3 first, Senator John Barrasso, who essentially, if Mitch McConnell says, eat red hot coals, eat lava, 364 days a year, John Barrasso would say, well, okay, I guess so. You're the leader. He's been very, very loyal to McConnell. He came out and said, I can't vote for this. So these guys who are from these Trumpy red states, they just don't want the phone ringing off the hook. They don't want people outside their offices. And so they're not willing to vote for something that they all admit in private conversations would finally do something about the border. It might not do as much as they want. It might not be as tough as they want. But the president now, who is open, fair criticism for the Biden administration's performance at the border has been pretty miserable. The president now is going to try to flip this and say, well, I negotiated a deal. I agreed I would essentially almost shut down the border if you pass this thing, and now you're walking away from it. So immigration politics have worked for a long time, and they do work as we speak in favor of the Republicans right now. It's an interesting moment to see if the Democrats can convince enough voters. Well, look, you may be mad at us in the rearview mirror, but we tried to do something. We actually tried to do something substantial that a lot of very, very conservative Republicans want, that a lot of liberal Democrats were mad about. But the president was willing to do it, and they walked away. Can the president make that pivot? We shall see. But again, the Republicans entered these negotiations. It took a long time because the Republicans wouldn't budge on some things. They got most of what they wanted, and then they walked away.
So what does this mean for funding for Ukraine? Because, of course, this bill was tied to funding for Ukraine. are they not going to get any money or what?
It's such a great question because, Jim just asked the question. I didn't answer the part about, how do people, this is your government at work. This is why for all the people, Democrats and centrist or governing conservative Republicans who look up and say, how the hell did Trump happen? This is why Trump happened. This is why Trump happened, because Washington can't do the basics. Washington can't put the butter on the bread. Washington can't pour a glass of water. Washington can't agree that Tuesday comes after Monday. And so then they say, well, why did they send this guy in here? Well, guess what? The American people look it up and say, you're supposed to be the professionals. So we're going to send in some amateurs because the professionals aren't doing their jobs. The Ukraine money was supposed to be attached to this, Marjorie. And again, there aren't enough Republican votes right now, again, because of Trump and how he has changed the Republican conversation. It's almost impossible sell in the House. It's a tough sell in the Senate, less tough in the Senate. But this Ukraine money has to be essentially in a big sandwich that everybody wants to buy. And it has to be, that slice of cheese or the lettuce that you'd rather have them take out. But it has to be a big bill that's popular enough that Republicans feel in the House that they have to vote for it. And if you don't have an immigration bill, I don't know how you do it. The Speaker says he wants to do just aid to Israel as a standalone bill. This is all posturing. So the Democrats say, no, we're not going to do that. So the House Republicans may try that and say, aha, look, the Democrats are anti-Israel. So this is what we're going to go through. Everyone's going to have their posture bill, their let's make political points bill. And it looks at the moment like you get no immigration compromise. Ukraine money is on a long pause, if not, I don't know how to describe it. And even a package for Israel is hard to pass right now because the daycare center can't function.
It's just horrifying to me to think that Vladimir Putin predicted long ago that the United States was not a reliable sponsor in this. Yeah, we'll support them for a while, and then we'll stop. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, we look like
while he's celebrating the arrival of Tucker Carlson in Moscow.
from Fox News or from Fox News. But I mean, look at how other European countries. I mean, we're kind of an international disgrace, I think.
It gets harder for the other European countries to keep stepping up because this is costing a lot of money. Let's be honest. This is costing a lot of money. It's costing a lot of money at a time a lot of Americans, if you look today, there's a story out today about, record delinquencies on car loans and other payments. People, so a lot of people say, well, gee, the economy's great and inflation is moderating. That may all be true, but people are still suffering from the whack of it before. And so when they hear their government sending billions overseas, it's a hard case. And it's a case that, President Biden has led the world on this. Whether you agree or disagree, he has led the world on this. I think he could explain it more to the American people, more frequently to the American people. To your point, Marjorie, about this isn't just about Ukraine. This is about Putin. This is about democracy. This is about stealing a neighboring country. The moral argument, in addition to the financial argument, I think. But at the moment, you're right that, number one, there are a lot of people just saying, what happened to the United States? Where is the United States? And number two, if the United States and the White House said today, if they don't get more money passed, then eventually, it's against the law. They can't. The president can't send Ukraine money unless he has congressional authorization for it. So eventually, they'll try every little gimmick and loophole they can find, but eventually it runs out. And if the United States stops doing it, well, you just wait. You're going to see these European countries who their economy is not as strong as our economy. Their people are demanding, issues. Domestic issues as well. You're going to see a problem. There's already rumblings, and it will become a bigger problem.
Here's another thing.
Are you going to stay on Ukraine? Because I have one last
go ahead.
Just to say, because we are criticized often for not painting enough factual contrasts between the two likely candidates for president, while Joe Biden continues to try to figure out ways to either get Congress to act or send whatever money he can to Ukraine, Trump has committed that if he's reelected, our United States funding for Ukraine will stop. Is that where
because he's on
Trump
the side
is, right?
of Vladimir Putin?
Well, whatever it is, but that is a factual distinction, John King, correct?
Yeah, he occasionally waffles a bit and says he's not opposed to some money, but. But you can look. Yes, I mean, in essence, look, the fact that Tucker Carlson is there, the visuals of that, a guy who sharply criticized Trump, by the way, on January 6th, who's now trying to curry his favor back into the Trump fold. It just tells you, if for those who think and those who watch the Republican candidates Republicans go after Trump, trying to pull the party back to where it was, It's a waste of energy. That party's dead. And if you love that party, you got to find a way to get in front of Trump and, take those principles with you maybe, but you better get in front of him and in front of his populism. If you think the Republican Party is supposed to stand up to the communists and stand up for democracy and that America is supposed to lead the world, you've lost your party. Trump took it away. And I don't know how they get it back. For those Republicans, I don't know how they get it back.
We're talking to John King from CNN, of course.
Well, let's look at Joe Biden, who's a Democrat, for a minute. There's this group, this UN group that has been supplying humanitarian aid to Gaza, and apparently there are several members of that group. I think it's 13 that were involved in the Hamas attacks against Israel, October 7th. Is it 13? Am I right? That they have. That's right. Yeah. So we have decided not to fund this group while we hear reports of starvation in Gaza. Joe Biden's got a lot of trouble already with people who don't like the way he's handled the war between Hamas and Israel. If this UN group if we're not going to fund them, is there somebody else that's going to give them the food, or what?
That is one of the giant challenges. The administration says they will try to find organizations. You go through the Red Crescent, you go through other things. So most of them essentially go through. The first default for them is to go through an existing pipeline, and the UN relief agency is the existing pipeline. So there might be other contractors essentially who take the aid and deliver it, or who help out, who add to it. NGOs that are over there. The White House, until this investigation is completed, if you're not going to fund the United Nations Relief Agency, then you're going to have to find a way around it, which adds another layer, another complexity, and yes, another avenue of criticism. That wait a minute, how do we get humanitarian aid to people who desperately need it? You do notice the president taking some steps recently to crack down on Israel for activities in the West Bank, for illegal settlements. The president, has been roundly criticized for being too pro-Israel here, and he's politically trying to find more of a middle ground, while the White House insists, and even today, just before I logged on, I was double checking, there are negotiations underway, and everyone's trying to parse a Hamas response to the latest negotiations about a possible ceasefire, a hostage release. There's also an Israeli report out today saying a lot of the hostages they believe have died since they were taken. Every piece of this, and we've talked about this for several weeks now, since October 7th, every piece of this is incredibly complicated, policy-wise, war and peace-wise, existence in the neighborhood-wise, and politically for the president. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And it's an election year, and it's hurting him among key constituencies. And he's trying to find a middle ground on the policy, and he's trying to explain the politics. But this one it's a mess for him because it's a messy issue.
John King, we talked to the head of the Civil Liberties Union from Massachusetts earlier about the decision of the 3-judge panel this morning, unanimously ruling that there was the president did not have immunity as claimed. Donald Trump did not. Now, the assumption is by Monday he'll either appeal to the full bench, the full appellate court, and or the Supreme Court directly. We hope they proceed more expeditiously. But it reminded me in our final minute, in your CNN poll yesterday, the one thing that I am just stunned by was this polling about illegal activity. And it wasn't the numbers that stunned me, that somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of Democrats thought Trump had committed illegal activity, 45% of independents, and roughly 10% of Republicans, but that the numbers were exactly the same as they were in a CNN poll prior to any one of the 91 indictments being handed down. As a reporter whose whole life has been based upon facts, which I know sounds really quaint in 2024, how did you react when you saw that there was zero change even after 91 charges filed against the former president?
Number one, that appeals court ruling is quite scathing, and the Supreme Court tends not to overturn the D.C. Court of Appeals, but we will see how that one goes. Number two, I'm just back from South Carolina, and I have a long conversation with the former governor, Mark Sanford there, who, remember, came back to the House after he was governor. He came back to the House, and then he lost a primary because he said things about Trump. He said critical things about Trump, and he lost a primary. Here's how he described this as this has become like a religion. for Trump voters who are now Republican voters, and that Trump has become a litmus test. Not only are you for or against Trump, but are you for or against the system? And so you have these people who think the system has been out to screw them for 25 years, who now have Trump as their vehicle. And even this legal stuff, Jim, they just, I'm in the facts business. You're in the facts business. My attitude, I've always say this, whatever your politics, have an open mind and read the thing. If you read the indictments, or if you read this, I was just reading again, trying to read, I'm about halfway through the appeals court ruling, and it's a 2x4 to the head of Trump's argument, just saying, no one's above the law. You're a former president. But yeah, you're right. Everything is viewed through, literally, if we had restaurant reviews, Republicans went in and the Republican came out and said it was great, the Democrat would feel compelled to say it was horrible, even if it was awesome. That's the world we live in, and it's upside down.
Okay, before you go, you have 30 seconds to tell us whether the 49ers or the Swifties win the Super Bowl on Sunday. Which is it, John King?
I'm for Brock Purdy. I think I said this last week. I'm for Mr. Irrelevant, the last guy taken in the draft. That is not a criticism of Taylor Swift. That is not a criticism of the Kansas City. I have a daughter who loves Taylor Swift, so I have to be careful here. It's not about. And look, I'm one of those people who think if Taylor Swift brings more eyeballs to football, and if
Amen.
And if more, and vice versa, more people look at her music and say, I like it or don't like it. Well, welcome to life, right? Let's look around and sample the menu. But I say 49ers, but I don't have a horse in this race. I have this team, they live in Foxborough. Probably be 8 or 10 years before they're back in the Super Bowl, but those are my guys.
Hey, John, thanks for your kindness today. We know it's screwed up your schedule a little bit. We really appreciate you can make time for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you very much, John. Talk to you next week.
Be well, John. Thank you.
We've been speaking with John King, CNN's chief national correspondent, involved with 2 great reporting projects this election cycle, All Over the Map and The Battleground. He just was in South Carolina talking to people down there. Remember Mark Sanford got in a little trouble, claimed he was off walking the Appalachian Trail. When
Not quite.
He wasn't
He's in
really.
South America, right?
With a woman. With a woman.
Yes,
That's
let's
right.
leave it at that.
Anyway, after a short break, we are done. After a short break, there's no short break. We're done. So apologies again.
No, it'll be a 21-hour break. To some people, that's
apologies
a short break.
to the. I have to move from down to the Copley Square to here. Yeah. But anyway, thank you for staying with us. We have a podcast. You can get the long one, 3 hours, the short one, that's a half hour. Tomorrow we're going to be joined by NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, our national security expert Juliet Kayyem, Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung, Harvard's Khalil Gibran Mohammed, the film critic Odie Henderson, who's got a new book, Black Caesars and Foxy Cleopatras, A History of Blaxploitation Cinema. We want to thank our crew who had to make the rush back from the library, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, who rode her bike, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, our executive producer is Jenny Bologna. Special thanks to the BPL team, Maddie Geyer, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Carly Corcoran, and Isabella Karen. Stay tuned to The Culture Show with Jared Bowen right after us. He speaks with Ruth Carter, the 2-time Academy Award winner from Springfield, who's designed costumes for years on Black history, from things like Do the Right Thing to Black Panther. Great costume designer.
I don't have time to complain, but I asked Hannah to put me in her basket and ride me back. And selfishly, she said no. In any case, we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm Jim Browning.
Flat tires, I think, really.
You're Marjorie Egan.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.